welcome, guys, to a very, very special weekday episode of SEAL Team 7. I'm Schrodinger's baby Seal, and I would like to welcome my esteemed guest, content creator, animator, published author, and just fantastic theory crafter, Ray Coffman. Ray, why don't you say hi and tell us what you do and what you're working on right now, and then we'll just jump right into the heavy theory stuff.
Well, I am Ray Coffman. I do a lot of JRPG centric content creation and Twitch streaming and stuff with a little Resident Evil thrown in there. Huge Final Fantasy VII fan, have been from the jump back in the day. I'm currently working on an animated series for my graphic novel Aurora. We're working on the second volume of my horror novel Derelict, and we are working on just a ton of FF7R content all the time. So thank you for having me, Baby Seal. Appreciate. I think it's my third time on the show, I believe.
It is.
I think the first time is me, you, and Sleep Easy, and then it was me, you, and Phil, and now it's just me and you. So it's my third time on the show. So always a good time.
And the episode with you and Phil is still one of my most watched episodes. It's very good.
Phil's a handsome man. So
but I've had Phil on his own. It was that combo that was really it was magic.
Well, it's the juxtaposition of that guy with that hair and me looking like a truck stop gas station employee. You know what I mean? It just worked, man.
I would love to roll into that gas station. I'm just saying.
Well, I'm ruggedly handsome, so.
Well, hey, just to jump in, I'm really excited to talk to you because it's the first time we've talked since the new stuff. And by the new stuff, just as a refresher and to be a time capsule, this is, of course, referring to the 25th anniversary of Final Fantasy VII, which was a big, it was 10 minutes, but it was 10 minutes of like pure adrenaline, nonstop, constant action. Can you just tell me real quick what your overall reaction was when you first tuned in to that the 25th anniversary stream?
Well, I was like watching the clock, because I was like, man, I don't want the Buster Sword clock showing up at 7 minutes and 30 seconds because I'll know that we're not really in for anything. So they really front loaded it with the stuff that they just wanted to get out of the way. Right. And so at 5 or 6 minutes, and they finished like with First Soldier, they finished with the merch, they finished with all that. I was like, oh my God, we're getting it. Oh my God, we're gonna get it. You know what I mean? And I was like watching it live, like all of you all were, the rest of the world. And they did the Crisis Core, and I was excited about the Crisis Core reunion. But then I was looking at the clock, and I was like, they told us this was going to be 10 minutes, and it's coming up on 10 minutes.
I know.
So this is going to be it. So they kind of, and this ties into with what I think is going on with the game itself. Where Enix, it's like they're not trolling us. They're like they're kind of messing with us in like a playful kind of way right now, because it ran 12 or 13 minutes because they wanted us to think it was 10 minutes because they knew we'd be watching the clock with that Crisis Core reunion thing. And then he comes on and says, "We've got another video for you." And it's like, oh, what? And so then it was just amazing. Like I told people leading up that couple of days, because the Capcom event was amazing. Like they just brought their A game. It was amazing. As a Capcom fan, I loved it. And I kept telling people, I was like, Square Enix doesn't just get handed the trophy. They've got to earn it. And boy, they earned it.
They earned it. Yeah.
They did. They earned it.
It's been a weird, non-E3 E3, just to talk about broader game industry stuff for a little bit. Once again, as a time capsule, if 20 years from now somebody's listening to this, E3 was essentially canned again for COVID, and as a result, Jeff Keighley took it upon himself to sort of, replace it with Summer Games Fest. And Summer Games Fest is, his own thing. It's his baby. And somehow he was able to, in addition to having the proper Summer Games Fest, attach the name Summer Games Fest to several like independent shows. And one of them was the Sony show, which, the Sony State of Play actually had the Summer Games Fest logo on it, and front loaded the experience of non E3 with such a dense package of like really good stuff. It had, it had the reveal for Street Fighter 6 with a new logo that didn't suck. It had Resident Evil 4 remake, which looked really, really good. And then Final Fantasy 16, which looks amazing. Looks like it's the first bit. Even though they put that sort of buzzkill release date at the end of it, which people were, I think everybody expected. Everybody expected something like that, but it was still hurt to see. But it was just such a front loaded thing that then the actual Summer Games Fest rolls around, and like the highlight of the show was the Last of Us 1 remake, which got leaked.
No one asked for.
Yeah, that's like one generation old, looked fine. I'm not saying that it won't be great. I'm not getting, because I don't want those people mad at me. But anyways, so it just ended up being kind of like this letdown. There was no Final Fantasy stuff at Summer Games Fest, blah blah blah. Then the Microsoft show came out. It was kind of like whatever. And then the Capcom show came out, and the Capcom show just like blew Resident Evil fans away, like with the not just the extra little snippets of Resident Evil 4 that really let us know, yeah, this is gonna be rad, but also the new Village DLC looks so cool and relevant and everything. And so Square Enix like was really absent, like it felt
they
like
had a hill to climb.
Yeah, the 16 felt like it was going to be like the thing that they were talking about, and that's fine, but we were just hungry for Final Fantasy VII news. And then the buzz around this, all of a sudden this Final Fantasy VII 25th anniversary event started buzzing.
They started going in on it. They were going in on it.
We had voice actors retweeting it, going like, this is gonna be a big deal, and we had like the official Square accounts that are like, that only kind of respond if it's like please be excited stuff, like coming out like please be excited.
They came out and they were like, please stream this, we want to see everybody's reactions. At that point I was like, all right, this isn't them just doing what they usually do, put the line out there and let other fans manufacture this false hype, because they do that sometimes, and then they kind of reel it in a little bit and draw you in. They went all in, and that's why I started telling people on social media. I think I saw your tweet about it first. I was like, hold up, what are they doing? And then I went and looked at the actual tweet itself, and I was like, oh my god, yeah, this is real. They're going in on this.
They're going in.
Thing you were talking about, it's wild because the Jeff Keighley is, I talk about marketing a whole lot, as you know. I talk about marketing in the game industry and everything. Jeff Keighley, very savvy. Like, he marketed the summer as he started saying it's Summer Games Fest season. And I was like, oh, you some bitch. I see what you're doing. It's slick. And there's nothing wrong with it. You know what I mean? But he went in on that. And then they did Summer Games Fest, and I was a little let down. And then I got to thinking to myself, I was like, as far as the things that Keighley himself puts together, because every year we do it. We did it last year with Summer Games Fest. We do it every year with the Game Awards. We get hyped. And then it's like, it's cool stuff if you're in like a certain niche. But if you're a JRPG person, there's not a whole lot of meat on the bone for you.
Generally, no.
And I think he puts together his thing that he's cool with and he's very interested in, and it applies to that niche. But as far as me, I think the stuff he puts together from now on, he's a great ambassador for gaming. He's wonderful. He's passionate about it. I think he's just low key like, yo, JRPGs aren't my thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, which
And
is
then
fine. Yeah.
yeah, so the point I was making was I love Jeff Keighley. He's a great ambassador for gaming, but I think as far as the things I like, I kind of start to get like, okay, I'm not going to get super hyped for it now. But I knew I had this feeling in my bones that we had Capcom and we had Square coming. I knew I had a feeling Capcom was going to bring it. And here's the thing about that Shadows of Rose, that was what people were anticipating Resident Evil 9 being.
Right.
And
Right.
they're giving it to us as the DLC. I was
Right.
like, oh,
Which means
oh,
whatever
and a
9 is
third
going to
person
be.
mode for Village.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
like my big thing has been like I love Resident Evil, but I don't feel the first person because you don't get the tension, you don't get the camera angles the same way. It feels like I'm playing Doom or something, you know.
Yeah.
Resident Evil is all about like atmosphere. You know what I mean? And in first person, I don't really get as much of that atmosphere as I used to when I could see who I am. You know what I mean? So that's just a thing for me. But anyway, enough about that. The Summer Games Fest season, all that kind of stuff. Uh, it's fun, but I have to temper my hype a little bit. And I was so happy that Capcom and Square were coming. I was so happy they both brought it.
Yeah.
It was just incredible. It was a great week to be a fan of gaming. It was a great week to be a fan of those two companies, especially.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Square's got like kind of a big roster coming. I mean, like more than just, the roster of JRPGs that, we expect from them, like, the established franchises. They're branching out too. They've got some stuff that's coming out. I Forspoken is really going to be it's going to be a wait and see thing. There's so much that's good about Forspoken that I'm really excited about. There's also some stuff that I'm a little concerned about, but it's still, at least they're strong enough to branch out. And I do think that Luminous looks incredible as an engine, but I think people generally probably want us to talk about the Final Fantasy. So let me ask you this: upon watching the Ever Crisis trailer, with the new Sephiroth chapter finally getting shown off, that's been teased since since it was announced, that felt like maybe it was vapor because like we saw so nothing about it.
Right.
So we got the Sephiroth chapter going on. We've got Crisis Core Reunion, which is obviously titled as such for a reason, and then we've got Rebirth Chapter 2, Final Fantasy VII Remake 2, which is called Rebirth. What were your initial thoughts about the direction things were going? Did you have any new thoughts? Did it change fundamentally the way that you thought things were heading for Remake, or did it just embolden things? What were your overall like initial takeaways, and then we'll get into like some of the nitty gritty.
It really just reaffirmed for me what they were doing, but also threw me kind of a curveball because, well, we'll get into that here in a minute. But for me, it reaffirmed the direction they were going. It also reaffirmed that they were like, okay, here's Ever Crisis, and we're going to stick to what you loved about the original in Ever Crisis.
Right.
Another possibility for a remake. They keep saying that, right?
Right.
So it's going to follow that original story to a T, and they're going to work everything in there. If you love Dirge of Cerberus, here's your Dirge of Cerberus section. If you loved Before Crisis and all these characters, here's your section for that. The Sephiroth origin story, like you said, they hinted we're going to get it for a while. And as soon as they showed the short-haired,
Yeah,
and he was smaller build, he was a tighter build, his armor was different and everything, and it showed the Wu Tai sword in his hand and the blood on his cheek, I was like, this is it. They're finally basically saying, we're getting the origin story. This is it, And then with Crisis Core Reunion, I go back and forth because sometimes it sounds like it's new voice acting, but sometimes it doesn't. Like I've watched that trailer like 7 times.
Yeah.
And like Zack and Aerith definitely sound different. Like it's definitely their remake saga voice actors. But Angeal and Genesis, I can't tell. Lazard, I can't tell. I
I can
hope.
I've got theories on who is. I can tell you that the voice acting is it's it's different. I don't know if anybody's been recast. I'm sure they have, but the lines are even different. So they have altered some of the lines. So it's definitely been re-recorded. I don't know who they've cast as Angeal or Genesis yet, though. But we can pretty much for sure guarantee that Caleb Pierce has reprised his role as Zack, and that Brianna is obviously Aerith.
Yeah. With the Angeal and Genesis stuff in the trailer, I was like, whoever, if this is a new cast, they're really close
Right.
to
Like they're
who
trying to
they
sound
were,
the same. Yeah.
and their cadences are
Mm-hmm.
different. Because I just started a new Crisis Core run, but then
Mm-hmm.
I was like, is this new recording or is this like outtakes from the original recording they're using? I couldn't tell. You know what I mean?
Interesting. Yeah.
Like a second take or a fourth take that they did in the original booth. So I couldn't tell. But
Interesting.
anyway, I'm really excited for Reunion, and you know, they named it Reunion for a reason. You know what I mean? It's called Reunion for a reason. So, not just Crisis Core HD remaster. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. What do you think that could mean? I mean, right off the bat, like, there is a vague mention in one of the Crisis Core Ultimanias of the reunion that Kai Loomis pointed out last episode. But other than that, like, the reunion is not the focal point of Crisis Core. So naming it that is
Mhm.
really interesting. So what are your thoughts on that?
Exactly what you just said. Like the reunion has nothing to do with Crisis Core's
Right.
plot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like I think what they're going to do, and they did, if you remember, they did this with Final Fantasy VII Remake when they first showed the first 3 or so trailers. Like they showed you a lot from the beginning, the first 4 or 5 hours of the game that you would recognize as this is definitely this, this is definitely this. They did the same thing with the Crisis Core Reunion trailer. A lot of that stuff happens in the first 2 or 3 hours of the game that they showed in the trailer. I think they're going to like do some like a little breadcrumb trail as throughout the game. And I don't think it'll be as drastic a change at the end of Remake at Crisis Core, but I do think something's going to happen where either you can play through and get the original ending of the game and play through it
Mm-hmm.
originally, or you can take a detour by choices you make. And this may be totally off on this, but there's going to be a way that you can get the ending that finds out what happened with Zack,
Right.
what's going on with
Right.
Zack leading into Remake. What we get with Crisis Core Reunion is going to be a big indicator of what's going on. And they scheduled these releases the way they did for a reason. We'll have exactly 1 year to talk about what's going
Mm-hmm.
on before Rebirth comes out.
That's
That's why they
right.
gave us that Reunion release date,
Mm-hmm.
winter of this year, which is going to be March. I think I saw something online. It's actually going to be March, first
Well,
or second week of spring.
right. So
Uh,
like what I think it'll probably be before that, but when Amazon does its
they
pre-order
have to do a
system,
worst case release date.
yeah, and that is the last day of Japanese winter. Right.
Oh,
So
Japanese winter. Okay.
it could be before then, but I am getting the sense that probably we're looking like January, February type thing. But I don't know why I'm getting that sense other than like that it's competing with other releases. So,
Well, I think too, if it were going to be before that, they'd say holiday season 2022.
it's
You
true.
know, that would be smarter marketing. So I think they're not really sure when it's coming out yet. But I'm fine with February or March as long as it looks good and it's done. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it
But
looks done to me.
yeah, it does. I don't know if they're debugging some issues with gameplay or whatever,
Yeah.
but tightening up some dialogue, who knows? But
Listening to our
also,
episodes to make sure that they're not making a huge mistake.
well, yeah, and like another big thing too is the release dates. Like they said, you know, winter this year basically for Crisis Core Union, winter next year for Rebirth. So for me, I like to think when I do theory crafting, I like to think about this stuff. I like to take kind of myself out of it, and I kind of try to get myself in the brain space of the actual creators of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, if I'm Square Enix, that makes sense because I want people doing this for a year once they figure out what's going on with Zack. I want them doing
Right.
this for 1 year. And
Right.
so when you pick up Rebirth, you kind of have an idea of what happened and you can just hit the ground running with the story. You don't have to drag your feet with a lot of that. You can wrap it up in Crisis Core Reunion, and then you can hit the ground running with what's going on now.
And the thing about Crisis Core is that even though it doesn't have like a world traversal system, it does show us parts of the world that we will have never seen in updated graphics. And so it's a way to tease us too, I think, with, some of the broader locations that we're excited about. And although the things that they showed off, like Midgar and Wutai, look essentially the same, but like just, with updated graphics, the important things, like things that we have reference for, like the church looks considerably upgraded. The church actually in the Crisis Core trailer looks better than it did in Remake. I mean, like, it looks better. Like, the textures look better. And so I think we're going to get to see some really exciting stuff with that. Like, this will be the first time we see Nibelheim in HD. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Like, and they're rearranging the score.
Yeah.
So, like, one of my favorite pieces of Final Fantasy VII music ever is, I forget exactly what it's called, but the version of Anxiety from Crisis Core. It's like a closed off village. That's what it's called.
Closed off village, yeah.
Yeah, that's the Nibelheim thing. It's like almost got like a drum beat underneath of the synth and everything. I love that piece, and I can't wait to hear all these like the world's enemy when Sephiroth is dueling with Angeal and Genesis. I can't wait to hear that or see that scene.
Now, okay, so that brings up a good point, that scene. So in the trailers, the intro movie of the trailer or the is actually the ending scene of the game, and the famous scene, and it's in CG rendering, like it's the old classic style CG, just that they like forced the sword to be different, like kind of sloppily, might I add. Like you can see little elements of the old sword underneath if you look real close. Do you think that scene, the one that you're talking about, like the most badass scene in Crisis Core, the weird simulator on June and Canon on Sister Ray Coffman, do you think that scene will still be CG, or do you think that they will redo that?
Dude, I think all those CG scenes are getting redone.
Hell
I think
yes.
they're all getting redone.
I think they're all,
because I was streaming Crisis Core the other night and we were discussing that because it was the scene where Shinra bombs Benora, and right before Genesis flies off, and I was like, look, you can't upscale this to HD, this old video, and have it look good with the game. They're going to redo all of this. You know what I mean? I think we're getting a complete overhaul of all that stuff. I hope we are anyway, because even those CG models in those videos, they're dated. You know what I mean?
yes.
And I think it would look really jarring against the great looking new visuals they have in the game.
I agree. Now, and speaking of that though, there is this, I have my feelings about Crisis Core. It wasn't my favorite game, but I do recognize that it's incredibly valuable and memorable to fans, and that one of the scenes that I think sticks out for a lot of fans of the compilation is that ending scene. And so it seems like it would be a little bit of a disservice to rob new fans of that scene. So one variation of this theory I've heard that I like is that we will get the originally rendered ending as our first ending, but as like a our secret ending, the hard mode ending, or whatever set of criterion necessary to unlock, we will get the other ending
what's going on,
that tells us what's going on, and that will be in updated graphics. That's kind of that's where my heart goes on that one, is that
I think that's a good idea, actually.
Yeah. because it bridges us technologically to the remake too. You know,
Hmm.
if we separate that too, I really I hope so. And you know, one of the things, and this will branch into remake talk too and rebirth talk too, but do you think that they're going to show off that lovable little terrier or that lovable little beagle stamp in Crisis Core Reunion? Um,
I
and
I
yeah,
think we'll see the Beagle first, and then okay. So this ties into my whole theory I've had all along
uh huh.
with remake, but we don't need to get into it yet. But I mean, I can dip my toe in the water right
Let's
now.
dip. Yeah.
But for those that don't know, my theory is we're dealing if we're not dealing with consecutive time loops, time just playing itself over and over again, which
Right.
there's a precedent for in the lore of Final Fantasy VII,
Right.
the end of all things and the recreation of all things.
Absolutely.
So yeah, basically everything ends and then it starts over, basically. So if the live stream, its energy can't be destroyed, it will have a record of all these previous time loops. You can't destroy that record, basically. And they talk about it a bit in Dirge of Cerberus when they're all on the Shera and they're having that big, hologram session. But if and there are hints given in the score, the titles of the score, especially in that last section when you're fighting the Arbiter and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, is there's one called Advent when they're basically drawing on the forces of Advent children, the antagonists, and there's one called Singularity. That's what you're inside of.
Mm-hmm.
And like in sci-fi, there's different takes on singularity, but whatever
Right.
happens outside of the singularity, the things inside are unaffected,
Generally,
basically.
it's
This also
shielded.
answers the two
Yeah.
Buster Swords thing.
Right.
Because if they're in the singularity, Sephiroth has tricked them to coming in and busting him out of prison,
Right.
basically. And so while they're destroying and tearing down the bonds of fate, everything outside of the singularity is changing. Like
Right.
that one timeline is changing. It's not
Right.
fusing with something else, it's changing. So
Fully agree.
while they're in there, given what happened in the past, where things changed, the whole world and time changed and everything, when they come out, they don't know
Mm-hmm.
that happened.
Mm-hmm.
But the game shows us a lot changed.
Mm-hmm.
Like Shinra's mascot changed. Zack
Mm-hmm.
survived. But while Cloud was in the singularity, him and his sword were unaffected.
Correct.
And when he came out, Zack still has the Buster Sword.
That's right.
That didn't change.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think I'm going to die on that hill. I could be completely wrong.
Me too.
But
I will die with you on that hill. Anybody in my chat knows that's what I'm very convinced is happening is that
mhm,
there's a single altered timeline, and the singularity, the party who went into the singularity has all of the experiences, memories of the now dead Peagle timeline, but they've wandered into this new timeline. I
yeah,
fully
exactly.
agree. I don't think that there's concurrent timelines, and people act like I have just killed their child when I say that. That I don't know why that is such an upsetting concept. People really want there to be either concurrent timelines or the new big sort of competing theory. Not that it's really a competition, is that Zack is like secretly in the live stream or dead or something like that.
Well, dude, yeah, and I've run into that too. I've had to not walk back things, but like kind of talk people off the ledge,
You're
so
right.
to speak, because you know I think people get tied into this one idea. I look at it from a storytelling and a writing standpoint. There are things in the world of Final Fantasy, not all of Final Fantasy, but Final Fantasy VII, that there is a precedent for. There
Right.
are a set of rules, even within the realm of fantasy, that you create in that world. Time
Sure.
travel has no part in Final Fantasy VII. In other Final Fantasies, it absolutely does.
Right.
But in Final Fantasy VII, it does not. There is a precedence for, like we said, the time loop thing, the one
Right.
timeline thing, messing with that kind of stuff. And the live stream is a powerful source of that kind of thing. It's basically like this collected database of all of existence. It goes beyond Gaia, and so yeah, I've had people just straight up come after me, and I'm like, look, I'm I'm shackled to the fence.
Yeah.
I'm dying on this hill. I am not
Yeah.
letting go. But the one thing that I will say after watching the Rebirth trailer, I was like, what if they're swerving us? What if they are actually just remaking the game, but they
Hmm.
had to put like a big paint stroke in there to fit all the compilation pieces together?
Sure. Yeah.
Because we've heard them come out and say, if you don't want to spoil your story for people, but you want to reassure them that everything is going to be okay, you come out and say some of the things that Square Enix has been saying. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but that also works in with the singularity idea. And
Sure.
you could still do all those plot points and stuff that you want to see. And especially how I think Rebirth is going to end. I think it's how you think it's going to end too.
Yeah,
Um,
it is. And we'll
but
get into
yeah,
that. We'll save that for the end because it's my favorite thing. I'm so
yeah,
stoked.
but
I'm so stoked that you agree with me on that.
yeah, like I think, if you look at what Final Fantasy VII is,
Hmm.
right? It's a tale of suffering, you know, not knowing who you are and loss. And like it's a very tragic story. It's a very dark story. I think it's what resonates with a whole lot of people, especially that come from a certain generation. You know what I mean? It's a hard story. Everybody in that story has had a hard go of it, you know?
Right.
And I love in the Rebirth trailer how it says, what is fact and what is fiction?
Right.
It stops on a few things because that's what these are the things that the developers want you thinking about as a fan,
Right.
so like
Right.
they know there's all these theories out there. I
Absolutely.
think you've got confirmation that some Square Enix people watch your stuff. I've gotten some confirmation. uh I think they want to let everybody know that there's a cohesive direction. They want you thinking along a certain path now, so
Right.
we'll wait and see. That's all kind of out there stuff, but yeah, I think we're going to see the Beagle first, and then something's going to happen. If you get that secret ending of Crisis
Yeah.
4 or whatever, you get the Terrier.
I agree.
So,
I think that's exactly what's going to happen. There's going to be some like because when the singularity is destroyed in December of '07, you know, Zack is aware of the Whisper Dome in September. So whatever's happening is it's as if all of the changes that the Whispers have been, maintaining are coming apart. It's like unzipping. And so that's
mhm,
why he can perceive it in the past is because that's changing. And whatever like bizarre butterfly effect thing happened that allowed, the stamp artist to decide what dog he was going to use, that's one of those ripple effect changes. It's
mhm.
very akin, I think, to in Back to the Future, the two trees, the two pines.
Yes.
He comes back and it's one. I think that's exactly what Terrier Stamp is. Is it's the one pine tree, um, the altered timeline. Like there's just these little
Right.
ripple effects, and I think that really, and just to kind of branch into the Rebirth trailer, what is fact, what is fiction. So imagine you're in the from the perspective of the party, you're now wandering through this timeline that doesn't, this altered time that doesn't quite match your experiences. That doesn't, like, why is the dog a different breed here? Like, what's going on? And I'll even put it further that I think that the line that Tifa has about, you know, did I die, or the and you should the Japanese trailer doesn't use death as like a thing. Are you saying I died? But it does allude to the fact that she's talking to somebody that perceived things differently than she recollects them, and I think there's a misdirect that tells us that she's talking to Cloud, like as if the version of the Nibelheim event is different than what she. But I don't think that's it at all. I think she's met somebody that witnessed her death in the Terrier timeline. Maybe Biggs, maybe Jesse, probably not Jesse. I hope not Jesse. A Wedge, and they're like, you died, because the Whispers weren't there to save them. The Whispers, which are shown an extremely like over the top in an over the top fashion to intervene to save the party on more occasions than was narratively necessary,
Mm-hmm.
unless it had a purpose, save the party's lives, you know? And so those whispers are now gone to save anybody's lives. And you could argue branching pathways and stuff like that. And those are all valid. But I think that line is about her meeting somebody that knows she's dead, personally. And I know we kind of branched into Rebirth, but for the purpose of Reunion, I'll just say that I fully agree that we're going to see mention of Beagle Stamp, and it might not get its own scene. It might just be added to the official graphics in Midgar, but that some catalyzing event will show that changing backwards. You know, like it'll show, you know, Stamp Bag switching from the Beagle to the Terrier, and as soon as that happens, then we're done with that part of the mystery, you know.
Right.
And which is a pretty good reason that they might not actually do it, is like, why solve the mystery? But in my opinion, they have plenty of other mysteries to fall.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, you solve one mystery and it opens up 5 more. So, one of the really wild things from the end of Remake, like, that I noticed, was, like, when it was clear that Sephiroth was opening a portal to the Singularity, and the planet knew what was going on. Like, the whole
Uh-huh.
time, the planet's been trying to talk to Cloud, and the planet's been trying to talk, or been talking with Aerith.
Right.
Like, I think the planet, like, when you see Zack showing down, like, starting his showdown with the Shinra troops at the end, they're not messing with Zack. They're messing with the Shinra troops.
Right.
They intervene directly with whoever they're trying. They're making the Shinra troops miss. They're making sure that Zack
There's less
survives.
Shinra troops.
There are less Shinra troops, and they are messing with the Shinra troops. I think it's the planet's ace in the hole. I think it's the planet, like, okay, Sephiroth's about to tear it all down. We've got to make sure Zack makes it. You know what I mean? And then, like, I think it's the planet's ace in the hole. I think it's the planet changing things. You start to see it then. Because why show the Whispers messing with the Shinra troops? Why show that? Because if the weapons are the shotgun in the closet for the planet to protect the house, the Whispers the ADT system. You know what I mean? So when we see that, you're already seeing things are about to change. And when that thing blows up, that dome blows up over Midgar, the Singularity basically explodes. I think wherever you were in time and space or whatever, cavemen right there would have seen that, or something. Anybody who was, like, touched in some way by the planet, would have seen that. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen a lot of people branching into the Rebirth thing. When the trailer for Rebirth first opens, you see sparkles of the live stream, like, coming down with the feather. But I have thought, I know it's a different color, but I think they're trying to tell us that's the last remnants of the Whispers, the last remnants of Fate and the planet's hold over that
Mm-hmm.
disappearing.
Mm-hmm.
Because anytime
Mm-hmm.
we see green, it's the planet, like the green overlay over Cloud's visions. Because if it's not the planet, it's Genova and Sephiroth, and that's black and purple.
Yeah,
So the colors are very important, you know. So we see those flashes of Advent Children with green and all this other kind of stuff, and then
that's
sometimes
right.
we see, like, shades of black and purple. It's competing. So when we see that at the beginning of the Rebirth trailer and Zack and Cloud walking, I think it's saying, all right, the planet and the Whisper's hold over this is gone. It's dissipated. Here comes this feather. It's like, now what? Now what are you showing us? Now what's the mystery? What is the feather about? You know what I mean? So, but the Whispers, I thought that was fascinating. People hated it, and I get why.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, people who did not like the direction that Seven Remake took, that's valid. I get it.
Totally.
But for
Yeah.
me personally,
I
I
loved
think
it.
it's dope because I
I
think,
love the Whispers so much. I
yeah, and
and
I
yeah.
think I know what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I could be wrong, but
Yeah.
I think I know what they're doing, and I'm really excited about it. So,
That's part of it, like knowing and then also not knowing. There's like a lot of excitement surrounding the mystery, um and that isn't for everybody. The mystery, the unknown, that isn't for everybody. That isn't stuff that people necessarily want. Some people really resonate with more concrete storytelling styles, and totally valid. Those are all just, subjective ways to experience this. I was one of the first people that, as soon as I saw like the kind of mystery box storytelling coming out with the whispers, etc., and this even the audacity to kind of take something so, for lack of a better word, sacrosanct, and
Mm-hmm.
threaten it the way that they did, it just it really hit all my chords, and so
Mm-hmm.
I think that you and I have probably like a rare fascination with that kind of storytelling, so I'm excited that we get to go on that journey together, for sure. And I'm gonna be on until the very end. So just
Oh yeah.
branching straight um into into Rebirth, um and then we'll talk about where we think it'll end. We'll sort of save that till the end of the talk, before question time. Uh, right off the bat, the visuals of Rebirth trailer were really very precise. They were obviously extremely manicured. You're an artist. You always tie into visual stuff. I know that I saw you tweeting about, the 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 red lettering with Rebirth. I saw you, just catching all the color references and stuff like that. Why don't you tell me about your journey with all of that stuff?
What I thought was fascinating, first off, like as an animator and as an artist, like there was so much storytelling in that trailer, and I saw some people saying stuff like, "Well, they just showed him walking." No, they showed a lot of personality. Like Sephiroth is walking dominant with a dominant pose, and Cloud is walking and hopping around like a kid trying to impress his dad. So this is not like them having a vision together. This is not Sephiroth coming to Cloud and showing him something. This is the flashback, because this is how Cloud would have acted. It's like a kid going to the park with their dad and trying to impress them and hopping around and being all energetic, and then Sephiroth just kind of marching. I thought the storytelling there was fantastic in their character movements. When you get into a lot of the colors and the color choices, if you look at Cloud and Zack, when Cloud is, and this ties into my theory with what I think is going on with Zack and where he's been for 3 months. I saw you talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he's weak, like he's almost desaturated. He's beaten up. He doesn't have any strength to put up a fight, and he's barely carrying Cloud. He's barely holding on. And they
Yeah.
did a great job showing that in like the color palette choices for him. You know what I mean? He doesn't look almost dead, but he doesn't look lively and vibrant like he always does. You know
Right.
what I mean? So it's like a slightly desaturated look on him. And I'll get right into it. The green bleeding into the red for remake, and not only that it's red, it's like, oh, it could be Vincent, right? No. If you think about what's the most famous scene with Genesis in all of Crisis Core? Him blazing up the glyphs on his sword and fighting Sephiroth on the Junon cannon. What did that look like when remake lit up? It looked like him blazing his sword up. You know what I
Sure
mean?
did.
So I was like, Genesis confirmed. He is going to be here. He's going to be a big part of it. And not only that, but he's going to be like a warden of the planet. I think he's going to have some kind of role like an Orin from Final Fantasy X, like an
Mm-hmm.
observer. He's not going to be a hero. He's not going to join the party, but he's also not going to be a clear-cut bad guy. I think he's going to be on some kind of mission, because when he wakes up in Dirge of Cerberus, he says, "We still have so much we still have so much work to do, brother." What does Sephiroth say to Cloud? And none of this is by chance. What does Sephiroth say to Cloud in Final Fantasy VII Remake? He says, "There is still so much work to be done." It's mirrored. Square Enix is a big fan of bookending things. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think Genesis has talked to Sephiroth. I think Genesis will have a big part of Rebirth. Now, and also, if you look at some of the double meanings they talk about in Rebirth, you know what I mean? Like you talked about Tifa, what she says to Cloud or somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And there are all the lines in that trailer can be misdirected and used for another reason. But I think you definitely get the Nibelheim. You're definitely getting the Nibelheim in this game, because I think you're getting to the Northern Crater. There's a line where Cloud says, if you look at the Japanese version, he says Zack's name. He says, "You
Right.
were here with me 5 years ago. Where are you, Zack?"
Right.
Zack, Zack.
Right.
They're in Nibelheim when he says that,
I don't think so.
because like he's like, "You were here with me 5 years ago."
I don't think so, and I'll tell you why.
Okay,
I think he's in Junon.
you
Here's
think
why.
so? Okay,
Yeah, because
let's hear
they
it.
were there 5 years ago. They were there in '02.
Hmm.
And it doesn't sound like he's talking to Zack. It sounds like he's
No, he's
recalling
talking about it.
something out loud. And
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense for him to go to Nibelheim and think about that, since he's already started the game by telling the party and the player a fabricated version of those events that
Hmm.
Zack didn't exist in. I think he's going to go to Junon and he's going to have a flash or a memory of Zack. And that's where that happens. Because that happens in
Okay.
2000, or that happens in '02, so
Yeah,
personally,
that's cool. Yeah,
I think,
that's a good idea.
but
I
I could
wasn't
be
even
wrong.
thinking about doing
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm playing through Crisis Core again, so I probably would have once I played through it
I
again.
believe it. Yeah, I believe it. And I don't get the credit for that one. That one I think is I think Turquoise Hammer, who, guys, if you are just keyed into what Shinra Archaeology Department is doing, Turquoise Hammer is putting out a lot of that stuff. Kai Loomis on the Discord is managing that, and then Strife is Rife. Uh, they are just dropping so many like ultra fresh, super deep translations. So definitely check them out. So I can't even take credit for that. I think that that he was right on the money with that, though.
Didn't you
Personally,
have him on recently?
I had Kai Loomis on last episode, and
Okay, all
for
right,
the launch of Shinra Archaeology Department's Discord server, which is really really cool. And
sweet.
ours in chat is putting those links, and I'll put those in the video description too. But so far, there is yet to be something that you've said that I haven't agreed with. So
Yeah, like the the artistic choices they made, not just in Rebirth but in Remake, and I think we're gonna see some in Reunion. Like a lot of, and I tell people this, and people think I'm trying to like poke at them. I'm not, but you really have to remind people sometimes everything is not literal. A lot of it is like artistic, like representation, artistic outside the box thinking. It's a different way of making you look at something and think about something. And it's called Final Fantasy, so everything is not super literal. So I love what they've done with the birds. Have you noticed this with the
I,
bird? Like,
oh my god, the bird stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
so they opened with a different type of bird in Remake.
Uh huh.
And then in Rebirth, they show different birds, not only in the opening, but at the end. When Sephiroth and Cloud walk up on that ridge and you see the Nibelheim Mako reactor up there, those same birds fly off. Like I know there's different birds in the world and all that kind of stuff, but if they chose to show that for a reason, then there is a reason. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Of course,
Yes.
there's different birds all over the world, but you don't focus on that and show that for no reason at all.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
So what's the reason?
it's representing change. It's changed. It has changed, but I think it's changing in a way that birds aren't real. That's funny, John Reeves. You're totally right, man. It's all a fabrication. What is real and what is not. So the the whole thing with what they're doing, I think, is brilliant because it's doing this. It's getting us
Yeah.
talking.
Yeah.
It's got us rolling on these theories, and it's a brilliant way to hold people's attention in the long wait between games.
Right.
And what they're doing with Cloud and him not remembering things, his brain is already screwed up as it is. Now that things have changed, how screwed up is he going to be? Which is going to lead to this humongous, what we think is going to happen to him, mental break.
I
You know what I
think,
mean?
yeah, I think that's definitely gonna be a deviation, but I don't think it's gonna be the kind of deviation that breaks the story. I think it's really gonna lean in, really, and I
Because
think
it does the same thing, but it
yeah,
does it in a more dramatic way.
right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think this is leading into the you know the thing that we're going to
But
talk
before
about
we
at
get
the
into
end.
that, I just
Yeah.
want to say that there is a real possibility, right? I want to drop this on everybody here while
Ooh.
I've got the ear, and I'm going to make a video about this too. But there's a very real possibility that all the singularity stuff, all the retrofitting and changing things around and swapping stuff is just a way to very much make this like a real remake. Like a real remake, and it has the same story points. It goes about the same way.
Uh
You
huh.
still summon meteor, you still fight Sephiroth and all this other kind of stuff. There is a possibility, which I don't think it is. I think there's a 5 to 10% possibility they're just straight up remaking it and injecting all the elements of the compilation into the story. And they had to find a way to hit like a button to blow everything up so they can. So it's like this: you've got a 100-piece jigsaw puzzle that was
Mm-hmm.
Final Fantasy VII, and you've got these other 30-piece jigsaw puzzles. Well, you got to throw them all on the ground and break them and put them all back together to make Final Fantasy VII. So I think there's an outside shot that that's what they're doing.
I th-
And that could be why they keep saying things like, "Oh, don't worry, it's still going to play out how you think it will," and everything. I don't think they would straight up lie
Mm,
about that. You know what
but
I mean?
I don't think they have though. Like, and that's a big point of contention is, and that's another thing that I really appreciate Shinra Archaeology Department for doing is they've really taken a fine tooth comb to all of the developer statements because this is one of those things that happens and other big content creators will kind of operate on this is the dev said this, the dev said that. And the devs have been artfully vague. And even the famous Katase thing, Final Fantasy VII will remain Final Fantasy VII, is the actual thing he says. Not that it will remain the same. It will remain Final Fantasy VII,
See,
which
that's what I
is
was referencing.
which
Paraphrasing.
like what a way to say like, hey, Final Fantasy VII's gonna stay Final Fantasy VII. What does Final Fantasy VII mean, and to who? And
Right.
Katase could totally lean back on, well, it means this to me, right? And so what they've done, I think, is really tried to hold all that stuff close to their chest. Does that mean that I think it's going wildly in a different direction? No. I think that the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle of what we're talking about, and that's that we're finding a way to make a Final Fantasy VII to end all Final Fantasy VIIs. And so
Right.
obviously you're going to need to include compilation stuff in that, and tie them all together in this way that's important and useful. Um, but obviously, even if all that's different about Final Fantasy VII is the method by which it gaslights you, that is a very significant difference. Like that
It
is a
is.
huge difference. It's a different experience. So we're already at this point where things different, and so I
Hmm.
don't think that means that a sliding scale should happen and that it should be like a fight between Sephiroth, Genesis, Cloud and Genova versus Sin from Final Fantasy X. I don't believe any of that stuff. That's a different kind of going off the rails. But I do think that what we're seeing is something that necessarily is going to be enough of a different experience that it's going to feel like it's got its own creative identity. That will still feel
I
like Final Fantasy VII, but
Yeah, and it will
different. Yeah.
because the thing at the core of Final Fantasy VII for me has always been its characters. Any good Final Fantasy game, the core it's always about the characters. And the thing that will remain unchanged are the core characters of Final Fantasy VII. Cloud, Tifa, Barrett, Aerith, Red 13. Vincent, Yuffie, and Sid are out there in the ether. They were outside the singularity, but they will remain unchanged. And the path at which they went in Final Fantasy VII has a lot to do with the personalities of those characters. They went to Coral, found themselves a gold saucer, did this, did that, went to Nibelheim, had all that kind of stuff. Northern Crater. You know, those characters thinking the way they do and being set along that path, we will still hit these places, but there's going to be so much more to explore now. Like, even
Absolutely.
thinking about the singularity thing,
Yeah.
like, I want Yuffie to be going after, thinking about, I need to go after Deep Ground for what they did to Sonnen. But there's also a chance that that didn't happen to Yuffie now. You know what I mean? Because, like, if you think about when she leaves Midgar, she's enraged, she's got blood on her face and everything. And then after the singularity event happens, she's not in it. And it shows her riding on a chocobo. She's kind of whimsical and happy.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I hope they don't go that way. But that's just one example of how some of the party members outside of that could change, possibly.
Yeah, and I mean, and would there be too much of a need to change that? You know, like maybe, maybe not. It doesn't. It kind of doesn't matter. Like I think, and I think, but you mentioned something about characters here, and no matter what happens ultimately with the story, like I just I think there might be a little bit of difference between who dies when and where, but I'm not going to get totally into that yet.
Right.
The characters themselves are just dripping with absolute confidence in storytelling to me. Like they absolutely are the characters from Final Fantasy VII. Like not just the way they look, like their characterization is so perfect to me that it's one of the things that makes me feel not scared about this story being told, because as much as narrative points are important, you know, the characters are so faithful to me and just they're just better. They're so perfectly themselves and so unapologetically themselves that, you know, I have confidence that they're not going to be put in positions that change their characterization so much in a bad way that I'm worried. And there's some characters, I'll be honest, from Final Fantasy VII compilation that might benefit from a little bit of like updated characterization. I'm not talking about Sid. I'm talking about Zack. Zack is a little bit too flat, I think, even in Crisis Core. And adding some complexity to Zack would really be, this would be a good time to do it, you know, as in Rebirth.
Yeah.
And go on.
No, you go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought you were done. Go ahead.
Well, you know, I'm long-winded, but the speaking of Zack, and I do want to just ask you about this and what do you think Zack's role in Rebirth could be? And I wanted to ask you about particularly the feather, right? So in the beginning of the Rebirth trailer, we see that feather falling down, and that feather obviously being most likely a reference to Angeal. Those Angeal feathers fell during the Crisis Core ending, and unlike the Crisis Core ending, the feather fell and hit Zack, and he, you know, embraced his death and, you know, went up into the white light. And we're showing an indication that that feather misses him now because his fate is different, whether it be like he's got a different kind of death or he's now alive, the more likely and obvious thing that they're trying to tell us. So we've got this clear, like, Zack is diverting from his character development in this way, right? So there was this closure of the legacy thing that happened with that feather. So there's this symbolism of Angeal transferring and accepting Zack into the live stream. And, you know, there was this kind of beautiful thing that happened in Crisis Core. I mean, arguably beautiful. I thought it was hackneyed and lame, but or not cool. But, you know, I think that we're showing that something is different happening to Zack. Definitely different happening to Zack. What do we think that might be?
All right. So I was waiting for you to ask me this. I had a couple of theories, but the one I went with, I always go with the sauciest theory that I think might be kind of like the spiciest thing I could say. So Zack at the end of Crisis Core, if you remember, he's got a line. He says, "I want those wings too." Well, the feather misses him. So like, there's going to be a thing with Zack in this where he's trying to work up to earning the right to quote unquote say, "I have those wings too," like the wings of a hero, a true hero or whatever, or fulfilling your purpose or fulfilling your destiny. Now, that's going to be hard because I feel like Zack has been reacquired by Shinra. I think he is in one of those underground labs
Ooh.
in Midgar. I think that's where he's been
Ooh.
for 3 months. And I think Hojo activated him
Oh
and sent him out
no.
because we know that Hojo has the ability to mess with people's brains and scramble people's brains or whatever, basically. Now, I don't think Zack is going to be a puppet of Shinra. I don't. I think he will break away with whatever's going on. But I think if you want to explain away 3 months, that could be what it is. It could be a deal where Zack was like, okay, I'll come with you, but I got to take care of something real quick.
Mm-hmm.
And he stashes Cloud with the Buster Sword somewhere in the slums. And I think he hides Cloud and he goes with Shinra because that's a very Zack thing. That's a very Zack thing. And what I said earlier about them showing his depleted color palette, him being
Mm-hmm.
desaturated, him looking defeated, dragging, hard to breathe. He couldn't do another fight like that. You know what I mean? Now that the whispers are gone, too. So I think he's been reacquired by Shinra because we know Sung and Cisne went out to look for him on
Mm-hmm.
Sung's orders. So he was either reacquired by Hojo or he was stashed somewhere by Cisne.
I
You know
think
what I
I
mean?
think Cisne intervened.
Yeah.
So okay, about the Buster Sword though, we see that in the intergrade ending, right? The intermission ending. We see Zack now cleaned up, going into the church. He's got the Buster Sword on his back. What do we think? Do we think like my thought was that, he was maybe spirited away by Cisne, given a chance to recover. He hit Midgar and realized it was way too hot for him. Like he had no business being there. They would be
Mhm.
all up on him. So he got some space, healed up, cleaned his uniform, cleaned his face, showed up, with a fresh smile so that he can impress Aerith outside the church. That was kind of what I thought, but I mean, I'm listening when you say that maybe he was stashed up by maybe Hojo. What do we think
Right.
happened?
Well, a real easy answer and without like a whole lot of thought behind it. And I throw this one out too because Angeal's like, this sword's been in my family for years.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah,
sacredness to the Buster Sword, right?
right.
But Shinra just manufactures a new Buster Sword to give to Zack. Okay, throw that away. That's an easy answer. Throw that away. It goes back to the singularity,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like,
Mm-hmm.
if Zack stashes Cloud, but doesn't take the Buster Sword, takes it
Mm-hmm.
with him if he goes to Cisne,
Right.
but Cloud inside of the singularity is unaffected. That's still happened to him in the past,
Right.
but he is in the singularity now. So what he has on him, like,
Still came off the
he's still
corpse
so
of
valuable.
Zack. Yeah, it still happened
Yeah,
the way that
it's still
we
the one
know.
that came off Zack's
Yeah,
corpse.
yeah,
Yeah, but that's how you explain two Buster Swords.
for sure. I think so too.
Yeah.
Okay, and then what happened? So let's just say that we're doing a reduction to absurdity here, and let's just go down the path of rebirth, right? So we've got Beagle, Cloud, and Co. just hit Terrier Calm, and they're doing the Nibelheim flashback, and we'll talk about the Nibelheim flashback now, and
Mhm.
we'll assume that we'll come back to what happens with Zack at the same time. Um, so Nibelheim Cloud, we got the incident. We're shown Nibelheim, like we're shown like the area around Mount Nibel, and we're shown Sephiroth. He's got like frayed hair. It's sunny out. What were your thoughts when you saw that?
My first thoughts was, oh my god, this is the flashback. You know, I was like really excited
Yeah.
because um, it it was it was really cool, like I said earlier, to see those two characters interacting like that. That's Cloud telling the story because we know he wasn't there like that. You know what I mean? I think Cloud will start to tell the story, and I think we will get to play through it. I think we will get to walk around in that, and we'll hear some voiceover, and then like it might stop at points, and then Tifa might say something like, "Well, was it like that?" Or basically my initial reaction though is like, God, it looks beautiful, and it's a huge area. Like it was like 1,060 meters if you look at the map. You know what I mean? The little distance meter thing at the top, it said 1,060 meters. I was like, oh my God, it's a huge area. I can't wait. But as far as the story goes, it's Mount Nibel. Well, he starts telling the story. I saw that look on your face, and I paused for a second. I thought I
Well,
missed
yeah. So sorry for YouTubers watching later. Um, I've been getting a bunch of stuff coming through about the Strangers of Paradise DLC was just announced, but whatever.
Oh,
I'll look
got
at
you.
it
Okay.
later. I'll look at it later. Um, so
But yeah, my initial
yeah.
reaction was just like, we're seeing it now. The story is going to be a huge part of the opening of this game, and we're going to get right to it.
Do you think we'll start there? Like first scene won't even be like them and Calm. It'll be like Cloud and Sephiroth in Nibelheim.
Oh, that's a great question. I haven't thought about that, man.
Like, where do you think we'll see the title sequence? Right? Because the title sequence in Remake was a slam dunk. It was just going to be the same. We need a new title sequence. Where do we see that? Where do we see the
Well,
word
okay,
rebirth?
I've got two thoughts on that. I've got
Mhm.
two thoughts on that. So like we know they're doing something. They're using cinematic cues from all these different things. Like even the way Integrate ended, with the rain starting to come down and then running toward Calm, and Calm was up in the top left third. It almost felt like a Stephen King movie. You know what I mean? Like suspense, like something bad was about to happen. Like
Mm,
everybody's waiting for the
mm,
story, but it's not going to be good.
for
This
sure.
is going to be the turning point for the party, and Tifa especially. So it had this suspenseful, almost Stephen King vibe to it. And so, like, I think they're going to get to Calm. I think Barrett will be the one to notice some things that are different. I think it'll be Barrett. And of course, we know Aerith is worried because now she knows things are different. Because I think the planet showed her them saving Zack. I think that was the confused look on her face when it showed the Zack flashback, and then the whisper went past her, and she had this confused look on her face. I think the planet was letting her know, "Hey, baby girl, we got you. We got this ace in the hole." So Aerith will
I
know
want
things
the
are different.
planet to talk like that so bad. Just
Yeah, yeah. Hey, baby girl. But I think Barrett will notice things are different, and I think the party will be entering Calm, and as it pans out, I could see the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth thing. I think it might be a quick hit of something like Cloud remembering something, maybe a little bit more of their conversation between him and Sephiroth in the Edge of Creation.
hmm
Maybe there's a bit of
hmm
that we didn't see. Maybe there's a bit of that still in his brain, but I could see them getting all the way into him telling the story and talking to Sephiroth and everything. And the first shot, and we're like 15 minutes in, right? And the first shot as it pans back, and right there where it pans back and the birds are flying over, and you see the reactor, it cuts away right before it flashes the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth logo.
I love it. I hope that's what they do. That's where I want to see it. Or real early on, like like right in the beginning of the Nibelheim uh uh fla- flashback, I guess, like you know, like the truck driving to Nibelheim. I would even accept that. Um
Or what if they do something like this? I just thought about this. What if they do something like this? Like it opens, because we know the Cloud has already remembered like some of what Sephiroth said. He's like, I'm a descendant of the ancients and all that kind of when they're in Hojo's
right.
drum. And he's having that vision. He's remembering that scene
Mhm.
between him and Sephiroth.
Yes.
What if it opens with him having like a nightmare, and that's echoing through his head, And the Barrett comes by and wakes him up. He's like, "Wake up, fool!" You know, and they're already in the inn. They're already inside the inn, and he wakes up, and then he starts telling the story, and then we get the title sequence. You know what I mean?
That sounds good too. Or what, like when, one of the things that I talked about with Sleep Easy last time I was on stream with him is that the way that this, and I think Max has talked about this too, so it's not like this is original. Doesn't matter if it is. The pacing of Rebirth is set to kind of match the OG, in that we're probably going to spend, like 4 or 5 hours in a flashback or in expositional scenes, and then get to leave calm into a big zone, into a big open world. I'm not saying that the game will be open world, but that feeling of like leaving Midgar, like for the first time, where you're all of a sudden, whoa, I'm out in the world map. This is bonkers. I'm out in the world. I escaped. We're going to have maybe that same feeling leaving calm this time. And so a shot of the open world with the title sequence of Rebirth would be interesting. It wouldn't be a terrible time to do that. Although it would feel pretty reminiscent of 15. And if I were them, I would try and distance myself as much as possible from 15.
Yeah, you
Now
want to
that
stay
I'm
away
thinking
from
about
that association.
Yes.
But I think that's a pretty cool idea. One of the really cool things about what they could do with the open world is, we might see some of the open world first. We might see that first. We might see something going on that has nothing to do with the party. We might see Yuffie running around, and we might see some other stuff happening. We might, we have no idea. We could see Rufus bringing Shinra troops to Calm, like they're on their way to Calm. Like, I've had this idea for a while that your first big battle of the game is going to be when you're trying to leave Calm and Rufus shows up with Shinra or something like that. And that could be changed too, because if the singularity thing holds, Rufus and them are not inside the singularity. So they were outside of it. So there's
I
something going on with all that. But
I
the
like
title
that.
sequence is very interesting. I
Yeah.
say wait till the flashback. I say do it in the flashback, man. That would be such a pop moment.
Here's my totally wild swing in the dark for how I think the beginning of the first 8 hours of the game is going to go. Totally wild swing. Start off cold open. Nibelheim flashback. Not Cloud talking about it. Like, I think it'll be Cloud and Sephiroth in the Nibelheim flashback. That'll be the first scene of the game. We go through that. We have a couple of separations that let us know that Cloud is narrating it to the party. We make it through the Nibelheim flashback. Next scene, before we get control of the party, we're in control of Zack. In whatever weird thing he's in, be it he's dead and he's wandering the afterlife in Midgar, wondering what's happening, or he's alive, which is probably what's happening. Everybody in chat that's seething. So or we're in control of a live Zack in the Terrier timeline along with the party, because there's only one Terrier. There's only one timeline, and it's Terrier. And we get some exposition on where he's going to go, why what he's doing will keep him necessarily separate from the party and separate from Cloud for the necessary amount of time. Like, he gets whisked away by a live Biggs and maybe Wedge or Roche, and they go to Wutai, something like that. Those are just random things. And then after all of that is established, and I think we'll get to play as like Child, Cloud, and Sephiroth, Zack and party, before we get control of our party again. I think, and that's what I think will happen.
That's pretty wild. I do like that, though. I like that a lot.
You know what else it would also do is, if there was some opportunity for them to like scale over equipment or get us some version of the, save transference, or we get like a base set of equipment, it just makes no sense for us to have nothing at the calm flash, like after calm, like for us to have zero weapons or just nothing. Like that's my
Hmm.
only problem with the Yuffie steals all of our stuff theory, is that it doesn't make sense for us to have nothing, right? But if
Right.
there's 8 hours of gameplay or something before we even get control of our party, it won't feel as weird for us to have stuff. Like for Cloud to have equipment, and Tifa and Barrett and now Red 13 to have like stuff, and Aerith. So that's one way to handle that. This is
I do
totally
believe they'll have to find a way to nerf your equipment.
sure.
I think the materia really, I think it's got to go
Think
because
so?
it was too easy to power up. It was too easy to level up in remake. The weapons and stuff, I don't know, because most people's stuff is already maxed out. But what do you do? I think you got to find a way to nerf it, or maybe level up the stuff that you've already got. Like you do a thing where you combine it with something else and it makes a more powerful version of it, but it starts at
Sure.
level 1 or something.
Yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I
I,
mean?
I I agree. I think that, and I'm confident that they'll figure that out. Like that's something that I don't think they have a problem with. I think
Yeah.
that even if you come in with like level 50 stuff, they'll either like just, hey, it's level 25 now. That's weird, huh? I wonder what happened. And just never talk about it. Because that's sort of
Right.
like ludo narrative dissonance stuff. Like we don't really need to worry about that. But or they'll just like power scale everything around it so that like I would love to see the damage limit broken. Like I would love, us to get, 4 9s broken real quick, but
Hmm.
whatever, like that's irrelevant. I don't like the idea though that they create some hackneyed plot device to reset you to zero. Like I'm not a
Right.
big fan of that, but me being a big fan of it doesn't mean they won't do it. My preference doesn't define reality, unfortunately.
Yeah. Another thing they could do is if, like, right out of the gate, like let's say they show the party getting in the Nibelheim, and it just shows somebody watching them. Like somebody's just watching them from the shadows. Like from the angle from like somebody's like behind a building or something like that. Somebody's just watching them. Because I've got this feeling that throughout the game, I think Genesis is going to have his eye on the party. I think he's going to have his eye on them. I think he's
Uh,
going to be like,
okay,
all
so
right,
Genesis is just out and about now, you think?
oh yeah, yeah, because this is supposed to be the point where he's asleep under Reactor Zero.
Right,
He's
right,
supposed to be asleep in that little portal that he made for himself because he didn't want to join Deep Ground's rebellion, you
right.
know. So this is the point where he's supposed to be asleep, but I think something else is going to be going on. But I don't want to get into all that right now. That's not why we're here. But like I think Genesis is. I think he'll be keeping an eye. I think you will fight him a couple of times too. I think it'll be one of those test the party kind of things.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
I think Cloud's not going to remember Genesis, and I think that's going to start a lot of his fracture because he's going to be like, "Yeah, I was here." Yeah, it's like, but you're not who you think you are. Or Genesis is going to know something about it too. But Genesis is going to play in a lot with Zack, and I think that's going to have something going on. There's a lot of things that are going to tie back to Genesis in the story. But I think you could open with him. You could open with anything. But I think the strong opening, like you said, is going to be the Mountain of Bell scene.
Definitely. Definitely. And I mean, they showed it off for a reason too. Like they showed it because they wanted us to know, like, hey, this is happening, and
Hmm.
I mean, I was blown away visually by it. I don't think it's Unreal Engine 5. I I don't think that. I personally I'm
Why do you
hearing a
not
lot of
think
uh well, because the game is closer to being done than Kingdom Hearts 4, and they couldn't even give us a Kingdom Hearts 4 trailer that wasn't an Unreal Engine 4. So for us to think that a game that is almost done was done completely in Unreal Engine 5 seems like implausible. It still looks great though. But I could be way wrong. I could be way wrong.
that?
It's one of those things I'd really like to be wrong about.
Well,
So
for me, it's a thing where okay, what assets that you already created will actually transfer into Unreal 5? Because if you can take UE4 and take them into UE5 assets or whatever, they already had all these assets built in Final Fantasy VII Remake. They would just have to like texture them up or something like that. But I don't know how that works from one to the other. I don't know if you can even do that. I don't know if it has to be completely built from the ground up in UE5
No, it
or if
doesn't.
you can.
They do have transfer tools, and I've messed around with the transfer tools. They're definitely easier than previous tools to, but uh, like a project of the scale of Remake and Rebirth, it really just depends on how far along they were in development versus when they got access to Unreal Engine 5, because there's a certain like plausibility level in terms of how many assets they had. It also does appear that the asset sharing is really like part of their style now. Like they're sharing assets between First Soldier, Ever Crisis, and
Mhm.
now Crisis Core Reunion. So I don't know. It's kind of, it doesn't matter to me that much. Like it looked so good that I don't care what engine it is. I mean, it looked really good to me. Like I was
Well, yeah. I
blown
mean, we
away.
saw how good the in game looks for
Yeah,
Rebirth. That was
yeah,
in game. We saw it.
yeah.
I mean, just the lighting. There was a shot of when Sephiroth was walking, you could see the shadow of his pauldrons on his hair, and it was moving and refracting differently. And it didn't look like chunky hair like PS4, PS3. Like Resident Evil 2 Remake, the first version had chunky hair everywhere. You know what I mean? This looked like natural hair, and it was really impressive to see. The lighting was off the charts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I'm seeing some chatter in chat like, uh has there been an Unreal 4 game that's next gen only? Well, there hasn't been an Unreal 5 game yet. So if there's been any next gen only games made in Unreal, the answer to that is yes. So, um that being said, who knows? I just, what they're doing is working, so I'm here for it. Uh
Hmm.
and I think the thing that struck me the most, and the reason I got so excited about like a 1 minute trailer, was that to see Mount Nebel realized like that, I had this image of how I thought it would look, and it looked way better. It looked
Dude,
way better than that.
it it had this nightmarescape look to it.
It looked so good. Yeah. But
Like
still
the
beautiful
mount,
somehow. Yeah.
you know what it looked like to me, and I don't think this is what they were going for, but it looked like a falling meteor.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it
Mm-hmm.
had the way it looked like something had impacted and made those mountains. It was
Mm-hmm.
it was breathtaking. And just the scope and depth of it, and their take on one, the bridge that breaks and falls, that they were going across. It was kind of like a rope bridge in the original, and now it's like a solid like bridge. It's big, it's better,
Right.
and the way they chose to show the facility itself wasn't what I had in mind, and I loved it. I was like, "Oh, this looks so good. It looks fantastic."
Yeah.
It has an ominous feeling. It's like it has this again. It has that Stephen King vibe that something bad is going to happen here.
Yeah. It really did. And the music too was really good at, and
Ominous.
and you are one of the people that really taps into music. I when I'm listening to your videos, you always mention music, and uh the my thoughts on the music of the Rebirth trailer were like, this is, it's so dynamic, and I want that track isolated too. I would love that track, and I've seen versions of it that somebody pulled the voices out of it that sound okayish, and it, the little elements of One Winged Angel in there mixed with, that really like the sharp violins, like it was just anxious. Like there was this real anxiety to it that, and I think that's going to be kind of, a core theme of Rebirth, is that kind of anxiety, you constantly questioning yourself and what you're seeing. And just right off the bat, that really, I think, matches sort of the core feeling of the OG second disc too. So
Hmm.
again, this is one of those things where it's like I really have a confidence that there's an awareness on how this part of the game made the its original fans may feel, and how it wants new players to feel about it too.
The music had me super excited. Like when you first kind of hear the first tones of it, like when it shows Cloud and Sephiroth walking, and you hear this bum, 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 bum. And like it was like with this violin going crazy, and the piece works so well. And I've tried to isolate it, and I haven't done a good job with it. I found a couple of sections
Yeah.
that there's no talking on, and I kind of spliced that into an intro for a couple of videos I did.
Ooh.
But like none of the instruments seem to be working with each other, but it's making this brilliant piece of music. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that, it's almost like all the
Yeah.
instruments are working against each other,
That's
and it's
exactly
like,
right. That is exactly how
yeah,
I felt about it.
y- yeah, and it's like chaos because if you think about the elements of this part of the game, there's going to be so many like character and story elements that are working against each other. Nothing's going to make sense.
Right.
Everything's going to feel off. And this was the perfect piece of music for that. And I'll tell you what, I thought this was like either, I mean, this could just be something they did for the trailer, which I don't think it is, but it's either like Psycho Cloud's theme or it's Genesis' theme. It's one of the two. Because I've always said that if you look at the Final Fantasy VII villain hierarchy, Sephiroth's at the top, right? He's Dark Side. And if you look at Rufus, he's Lex Luthor. Genesis would be like the Joker. You know what I mean? Especially what they're going to do in this. And I hope that's the way they choose to portray him. But yeah, it that music gave me chills, man. Like I was like, I want this track on my phone, just the track right now.
Totally. Totally with
And
you on that.
Nibelheim, if you think about OG and Remake, I talked about this track earlier, but what's the name of the track when you get to Nibelheim? Anxiety.
Exciting. And I'm really excited to hear that redone too.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Oh yeah.
and so you brought up something that's I think going to be really interesting, and that's that the soundtrack will not just be, in my opinion, reorchestrations and remakes of the original soundtrack, but it will also include new songs and themes for new
Oh,
characters and concepts.
absolutely, dude.
And I am really
Absolutely.
excited to see what those things are, you
In
know?
Remake, some of my favorite tracks on that soundtrack were the new tracks. Ghoul, The Day Midgar Stood Still, Avalanche's theme. I mean, those were fantastic. Of course, the remakes were good too. But The Day Midgar Stood Still, that's when you're climbing up the wreckage of
Mm-hmm.
Midgar and you're fighting I forgot what the mechanical boss's name is at the end of that part.
Valkyrie.
But it's got this real heroic, like
Mm-hmm.
rising theme to it. The ba 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 ba, and then the guitar kicks in. I mean, I've never heard a soundtrack do orchestration with guitar so well, unless you're like a Finnish metal band. I mean, like I've never heard a video game do it that well, man. It's so good. I'm super excited for the new themes they're going to do in the second game.
Fair, fair. So okay, we're at the hour and a half mark. So let's just focusing on what happens to, we'll call them the Beagle Party, and where that goes. Where do you think the game is going to end? The Beagle Party.
Okay, so the Beagle Party about to go on a ride. So Cloud, throughout this game, you're going to have people poking holes in his story, right? Tifa's going to be challenging him a lot. Barrett, you can see through the different people's personalities that they're going to challenge Cloud a lot on a lot of things he's going to be saying. Cloud is not fit to be a leader. We love Cloud, right? But he's not a leader. You know what I mean? So there's going to be a lot of this going on. We're going to meet Sid, Vincent, and Yuffie. I think there's going to be some things about Cloud that Yuffie is reminded of Zack, and then because we know she had a tight relationship with him in Crisis Core. So we are going to get to the end of the line. We are going to get to the Northern Crater, and it's all going to come to a head. Cloud has the black materia. He's going to give it to Sephiroth. He's going to go mad, and the party is going to have to battle Reunion Cloud. Like, brick shithouse Cloud, just swinging, screaming, just, totally broken Cloud. And it's going to be something that builds throughout the game. Because Cloud's whole story is, it's not just an identity crisis. It's a big commentary on kind of like mental health, trying to live up to something you're not, trying to be something you're not, trying to, basically tearing yourself apart and not realizing it. That Cloud needs help, like all of Final Fantasy VII. He needs, and not to be funny, he needs therapy, like all of Final Fantasy VII. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He needs to sit down and talk to somebody throughout the entire game. But what happens when you go and go and go? You don't give yourself a break. You don't give yourself any kind of grace at all. And you've got people kind of nitpicking your story the whole time. Well, you're eventually going to break. The party is going to have to battle Cloud at the end of it. And I know this is something that you agree with me on. But here's the thing. Throughout the game, the Beagle party is going to have other things happen. Barrett is going to begin his dealings with Dyne. Like, I don't think you just one-off Dyne at the Coral Prison. I think he will be an ongoing factor.
A recurring, okay.
Yeah. Tifa will be having her constant struggle with Cloud and whoever else comes into the picture. That's going to be her focus. Aerith is going to be focused on, well, I knew what was going to happen before. Now I don't know what's going to happen. And I know Zack's out there now. I'm looking for you. I'm looking for Zack, I think she's going to be trying to find him and trying to find out what's going on with him. And then she's also worried about Cloud. She's worried about Cloud too. So there's a whole lot going on with that. Then you're going to have Sid, Vincent, and all them. Red 13, something no one's talking about. Red 13, we're going to get to Cosmo Canyon. We're going to meet Bugenhagen, who is going to be a wellspring of knowledge on what's going on. Bugenhagen is going to be like, look, some real shit went down, and I don't know what exactly it was, but shit's different. and he needs to be voiced by Tommy Chong, right? So I think when you get to Cosmo Canyon, Bugenhagen with Red 13 and all that kind of stuff, I think all these people are going to realize something's wrong with Cloud. Not just that his story isn't adding up, but there is something really wrong with him. And I think by the time you get to the end of the game and you deal with everything you got to deal with and everything, Cloud is going to be just a terribly, terribly difficult boss fight. And it's not going to be Genova controlling Cloud. It's going to be Sephiroth manipulating Cloud. Like, in the whole time in Remake, Sephiroth's like, I need you to be stronger. Well, what's that for? We don't know. And I don't think it's the same boss fight. I think it's something more than that. But I think this is the first big reveal of what Sephiroth wants with Cloud.
Right.
So I'm not even really fully sure what that is yet. Of course, I could speculate 10 different things, and all of them are going to be way off target because I don't really feel like I have enough data to put together a good assessment of it yet.
None of us do. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but my gut feeling is it has something to do with Sephiroth becoming like some kind of version of complete. And we see incomplete Sephiroth all the time because he's got the one wing, right? Who's got the other wing? Genesis has it. What does that mean? We don't know. You know what I mean? Are they going to do the fusion dance? You know, it'd become like red and silver, two Blackwing Generoth. I mean, who knows? But um, I think the whole thing with Cloud, that's where the Beagle Party is going. They're heading for tragedy. The second Rebirth is going to be a tragic ending. It's Empire Strikes Back.
It's Empire Strikes Back. It's The Godfather 2.
Yeah, exactly.
I definitely think that the only way you top beating up Sephiroth at the end of part 1, I mean, how do you top that? Now, I cannot think of a better boss fight than like a tragic, we've got to fight Cloud. Perhaps the title Rebirth is about Sephiroth being reborn through Cloud. There's a lot of foreshadowing to a more significant mental deterioration with Cloud in Remake Part 1. He has to be stone cold talked out of killing Johnny and Reno. He's starting to break a little sooner. He's Hojo almost gives him a crisis that the Whispers actually have to intervene on at a certain point by saying, hey, that's not who you really are. He gets the little flashes of himself in that tank. There's a bunch about Cloud that is showing us that he's at a mentally deteriorated state. There's also, I think, the biggest clue to this, and people act like I'm crazy about this, but the only like truly quote unquote optional or secret scene that you get in all of Remake that requires you to do it on hard is the Top Secrets fight. When you beat Top Secrets, Chadley has this bananas exchange with Cloud where he basically says that it is because of Cloud's infinite potential that Chadley was able to break free of his bondage to Hojo, like break free of his programming. So what we're being presented is an aspect of Cloud that would be attractive to somebody that is very clearly like gunning for his soul or body or something. And and then we, if you juxtapose that with the 7 seconds to the end scene, the Edge of Creation, it's clear that Sephiroth wants something from Cloud. And so I really think that the end of part 2 is going to involve the loss of Cloud's soul, and that the beginning of part 3 will be gaining it back. And so where I think you and I might differ is what that looks like. To me, what it looks like is that we lose Cloud around or involving the death of Aerith. I think that we lose Cloud there. Like, we as the party, he's gone officially. I'm not saying that he kills Aerith. There's a part of me that thinks that they won't take the iconic scene of Sephiroth descending away. I think that's a little bit too well known to take away. But I do think that like the intensity at which, you're almost raising your sword over her, like just the feeling of like loss of control of the party. I think that stuff all gets escalated. I also think that we'll see something at the Temple of the Ancients where it's like really scary. Like the party's starting to go like, why are we hanging out with this dude? Like really see that. Like, I'm not sure if the level of violence that is implied in the OG would work in a modern game.
He's not going to fight club her, no. He might push her down or something, but he's not going to go fight club on her.
He's not going to fight club her. Yeah, that's probably not a good message. But there's going to be something that really, makes the party question that. And I think that, so what is the solution to that? And I think ultimately that's why Zack has been injected back into this story. I think even as people that have witnessed, Crisis Core is getting a, this great remaster. I I think the only way for us as the player now who has this full experience of, and people don't like this, get really mad and uncomfortable when I say this, and if it happens, I'm so sorry. Don't blame me. I didn't do this. The only way to make the death of Aerith have an impact that really connects with the players
I know where you're going.
is that Zack witnesses her death too, because it is very much our loss of Aerith, like the player's loss of Aerith, that almost makes more of an impact than what theoretically Cloud's loss would be. Cloud feels guilt over the fact that he had a part that he was unable to fight. That's definitely part of his identity thing. I'm not saying that he doesn't have feelings for. I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. But what I am saying is that the only way to make that seem more impactful from, say, like a developer standpoint, and I'm not even looking at chat because I know they're mad, like, is to have all the characters that the player has connected through with the life journey of Aerith witness the death. And so I think that's when Zack really joins the party, is to fight Cloud in the end of the game. And by that point too, like, whatever happens can his Cloud is no longer Cloud at this point. Like, his experiences are unaffected by seeing Zack. Like, his identity is still broken. It doesn't matter. So, like, the things that really matter in the game, in my opinion, like the emotional climax of the game, like Tifa in the live stream with him piecing back together his psyche, from Cloud's perspective, they're the same. Like, he has had nothing really spoil that for him. From Cloud's perspective, he's in the live stream. He still has to get, pieced back together with Tifa in the live stream before he becomes who he really is. And I think there's still plenty of room for that. So I think the most dangerous thing about Zack being alive is that he diminishes Cloud, and people are probably going to argue that that's happened no matter what. I think as long as he doesn't intersect with Cloud until after, he's pieced back together in the live stream, and it doesn't count if it's during Aerith's death scene, because Cloud's already gone at that point. That's not Cloud you're fighting. That's Sephiroth controlling Cloud. I don't see that as being a threat to that development, personally. So how Genesis works into that, I don't have ideas on how Genesis works into it yet. I really don't know. You've got more of that keyed in.
Well, with the Cloud thing, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, I did about 2 years ago. Well, it was like after I finished Remake the first time, I did a video called Sephiroth's Purple Prison and Rebirth, basically. Now, I wasn't calling it the game was going to be called Rebirth, but I knew that Rebirth was going to have the voice in this next game. The fact they called it Rebirth just kind of reaffirmed kind of what I thought the theme of the game was going to be. But when you break Sephiroth out of prison, you're basically freeing his soul. His mind has always been there. So if you go mind, body, and soul, the next thing is he needs a body. You know what I mean? It's like mentally, he's been living rent-free in Cloud's head. You break into this singularity, and the big, basically prison warden, you got to kill him. And it never really makes total sense why you're fighting this thing. You know what I mean? Like, the only answer is kind of you're being tricked into it. You know what I mean? Because you're made to think that the Whispers are kind of like an antagonistic force. They're not. They're a home security system for the planet. But Sephiroth tricks you, the player, and the characters into thinking this is what needs to follow me in here. Come on in. And then once you're in there, you take everything out. So that purple inside of the chest of the Harbinger, the huge thing, that's Sephiroth's prison.
Right.
And so, like, when it breaks, when you beat it, and he's standing in front of the vision of Meteor, and all that black's being absorbed, it's all that negative life stream and all the Harbinger and all that kind of stuff. Because then what happens? Now he's in control of the whispers. He's throwing them at you. He's doing all.
Mm-hmm.
He's in control of all this now. But you're fighting him on like a spiritual plane, inside the singularity.
Right.
So his soul is freed at the end of the game. His soul walks on Gaia now. It's not just visions and clones of Sephiroth or whatever. And you're right. Now he's going to need a body. And I do believe that is part of where he wants Cloud to go.
Mm-hmm.
And we know Nomura's been wanting to put a black wing on Cloud for a long time since Kingdom Hearts 2. So
That's right. That's right.
So we know he wants that. But so yeah, spot on with that. As far as Genesis goes, if you look at the time loops theory, like
Mm-hmm.
Dirge of Cerberus was a previous time loop. So he wakes up, he's got, Vice and all this kind of stuff. He's like, there's still so much work to be done. When I feel like when he was asleep and he was slumbering and he was garnering knowledge, and because at the end of Crisis Core, he has changed. Like he's not comatose at the end of Crisis Core, he's completely broken because he thought he was this big hero. And then he went up against Zack the puppy, quote unquote, and he got a taste of what like a real hero, a real selfless hero is, And there's a line Genesis has at the end of the game when he screams at Zack and he says, show me your pride as a soldier. He's screaming not because he's challenging, because he's like, show me what I thought I was. Show me what I wanted to be, because he thinks I'm going out on my sword,
Mm-hmm.
Then whatever you want to call that at the end, Minerva, him getting kicked out of the live stream, or if that was just his mental representation of what was happening to him, when he comes back, he's completely broken.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't know who or what he is. So when he goes into that stasis he puts himself in, I think he gets a lot of information.
Right.
I think he's the first one to crack the code that they're in a cycle of loops, or that, they can commune with the light and all this other kind of stuff. So when he wakes up at the end of Dirge of Cerberus and he's like, we still have so much work to do, brother. I think he's talking to Sephiroth, but I also think it's a double entendre. I also think it was the dev team talking to the fans.
Mm.
I think it was the dev team saying, hey, we still got a lot of stuff we want to do, y'all. We'll see you in a little bit. And then he flies off. So, like, that's the end of that time loop. And now, Genesis has probably conversed with Sephiroth, said, hey, we can read the live stream. You know that, right? We can read. we can look into this stuff. I think Genesis will have a hand in some perspective in that way. Like, Sephiroth has knowledge of previous time loops in a perverse way. Aerith has it in a natural, the planet giving it to her way.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it's the juxtaposition of the two characters anyway.
Right.
I'm really interested to see what conversations that Aerith and Sephiroth have, because the voice actors or the mocap actors have said that they have shot scenes where the two of them were having conversations. They were together in the scene,
There's no way they
I'm
don't
really
talk.
excited to see
There's
what they do
no
with that.
way that they don't have some kind of meta conversation, and it's not.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's going to be so much ground covered now
Mm-hmm.
that they can do it, and they've got the time. I can't wait, man. It's going to be great. But the whole Cloud boss battle, I'm excited about that, because think of the cast of, like, it's pretty much the entire cast of characters there at the end. Not only your party, right? And if Zack shows up, but you've got Rufus and Shinra's there, and so I could see like a situation where like a guest party member, like you see bouncing around in the background and reloading his gun, and the Turks and everybody, I think they're all firing at Cloud too. I think they're trying to take down Cloud in the battle too, but they're not party members, but they're like in the background, like just kind of like shooting or whatever, just for like some flair. And picture this, man. I did this in the video that I put on YouTube, but picture this, man. In the background, like the setting, you just see Sephiroth encased in the ice with the black materia, and like just glowing, and like just like almost like coming to life almost. You know what I mean? I can't wait, because the ending of the game, even after you beat Cloud, and all the music, they're gonna bring it on the music for that scene, dude. Can you so let me pick your brain. Well, what kind of music mashup would you want to hear for like Reunion Cloud?
I want it to be a little new, but in order to connect with with who's in charge. You know, I would like something that alludes to Sephiroth and Genova, etc. And you know, I think that when we talked about the the rebirth music, something along those lines is good for Psycho Cloud to me, for Evil Cloud, is
Hmm.
something that does exude anxiety and stuff like that, but has the elements that tie us to, you know, the willpower. And you know, when you talk about Sephiroth and you talk about will, it's sort of an important conversation from a mythos perspective, because that's kind of the way that the Sephiroth in Kabbalah and mysticism is conceptualized, is that, you know, these 10 these 10 Sephiroth are, you know, sort of manifestations of will. And so the very concept of Sephiroth is like he's will, you know, he's the will of Jehovah, which is Genova, etc. And so there's this,
Hmm.
you know, there's this tie where he's like sort of disembodied will. And so him exerting control over Cloud in a more successful way, I would like to hear elements of his music in there, but it also, I want it to feel new, something that really feels like close to that Rebirth trailer music, but recognizably new enough that it feels like we know what that means. Like you hear it and you think about Evil Cloud, you know, if that's the way that they go, etc.
Right.
In terms of things I'm excited for with music in Rebirth, it's like the list is super long. I mean, there's like a bunch of parts of the game that I really want the, you know, music to be. But my one like sort of off request, like the request that I think I don't hear a bunch of, is that I would like them to mix genres a little bit. Like I don't just need classical orchestration. I would like some synth stuff in there too. You know, because
Hmm.
I would like, you know, a little bit more of that uh you know, variety in some of the songs.
Dude, I love the music in the Honeybee Inn. Like Vibe
Yeah, yeah.
Valentino, that's on my workout mix. Like
Yeah,
I think it's
yeah.
the last part of their dance battle or whatever. But I love that. It's in my it's actually in my heavy lifting mix every week. So I love listening to that. They all the music, what they've done with it, it's all been good. I haven't heard like a bad track out of this thing.
Agreed.
Even the 50s doo wop Happy Turtle theme. Be turtle.
uh I'm looking at some chat stuff just because it's been distracting. I know a lot of people I looked and yeah, a lot of people were upset with me, but um one thing that I'm saying is okay, you guys, Cloud ain't killing Aerith, you guys are nuts. I kind of agree, but there is one dark interpretation that I've heard a few times, that, you know, maybe we get uh you know, like this vision of Sephiroth descending, and then it pulls back and we see it from a different perspective and it ended up being Cloud. Like that would be that would be madness. I don't see them getting away with that, although I wish they could. Like I think that would be like the kind of that'd be the kind of drama, like not your grandma's not your
But
grandma's Final
also
Fantasy VII. Yeah.
think about this. Final Fantasy also borrows a lot from Star Wars, right?
Hmm.
So what does Obi-Wan Kenobi say? He's like, from a certain point of view. Like you
Yeah.
don't have to actually have the blood on your hands to be responsible for it.
Yeah.
And, I think that's something they could do with Cloud as far as Aerith's death. Like, he didn't do it, but he wasn't of sound mind to really defend against that either. He was definitely part of the problem in that scenario.
Hmm. He was. And
And
yeah.
go ahead.
Well, and I think too, like the one of the elements of his involvement with the whole thing that I found troublesome in the first place, it always kind of strained plausibility for me, was that the party was just okay with him after. Like he had his sword above him and he had just beat her up, and then the party just chills with him for a while. And
Yeah.
I think that him sort of absconding to the Northern Crater on his own, and then the party chasing him with Zack makes more sense. And I also think Zack is the only character other than Tifa that has the developmental sort of heart to spearhead a forgiveness thing. You know, like even like if there's one character that would be okay with somebody like, you know, that would be able to forgive somebody for being like, you know, even a party to his, you know, quote unquote girlfriend's death, it's Zack. Like Zack is that kind of pure. And so it almost adds an element of plausibility into allowing Cloud's eventual reintegration into the party. And I'm not saying that like the end of part three won't, that Zack will make it to the end of that. That the whole time you're gonna have Zack and Cloud in your party. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just talking about part two right now. But you know, so just word.
But with Cloud as well, like when you do get him back,
Mm-hmm.
like he needs to feel like a different character. Like he needs to talk different. He needs to act different. Even give him a different move set. How he holds the Buster Sword, like how he moves in battle. It needs to be more concise, more confident, more streamlined.
Yeah,
Because
sure.
he definitely needs to feel like a different character when he comes back out of his coma. And I can't wait for that scene because I've had off camera conversations with you before
Yeah,
how much that scene means to me. You
right.
know, like that whole piecing Cloud back together. That is like one of the most potent scenes in the history of video games for me because it's so real.
Yeah,
Like it's so real, and
yeah,
so many people deal with that kind of stuff. And I can't wait for that scene. But when he comes back out of that, he even if Zach's around or whatever, he needs to feel much different.
yeah, absolutely. And you know, I see the risk. It makes me uncomfortable to think about them being in the same party together. And
I don't want them in the same party together
me
for sure.
neither. Me neither. I don't think anybody does. Like I really don't. Um, and so you know, that's I think a large part of the appeal of some of these. You know, he's completely disconnected. The only impact he'll have on the story is meta. You know, that kind of thing. Like that's why I was so attracted to those types of stories early on. You know, and when Max Dude came out with the multiverse theory, I was like, yeah, that's I think that's where I'm going with this. And then, you know, but some stuff has changed for me, obviously, not just reinterpretation of the lore, but also just stuff that, you know, um, Square will sue me if I say. So, like I just have this kind of inclination to think that his connection is going to be more tangible, and so I'm trying to one prepare the audience for that, you know, as much as possible. But two, I'm also like I'm looking at what was delivered so far. I'm looking at what's what the developers have said really closely. I'm looking at all the evidence presented, and I'm thinking, well, can they make this work? And is this the team to do it? And a lot of people will look at, you know, like Final Fantasy 13 and say, no, they can't do it, you know, or look at the different things, you know, Kingdom Hearts, no, they can't do it. But I'm looking at what they've made. I'm looking at every developer statement. I'm looking at the how much this project means in general, and I have some confidence that something could happen. You know that with all of this, including Cloud, you know, Cloud and Zack sharing a universe, as horrifyingly, you know, deal breaking as that sounds, and thinking, I think they can do it. I really do. I think they can do it. So, yeah,
Well, I'm of a mind too that you look at if you look at things like Final Fantasy 13, Square was a mess when they were trying to get that game out.
mm-hmm.
That was originally supposed to be a swan song game for the PlayStation 2. Square Enix was a mess at that point. You can't judge anything they do now based on Final Fantasy 13. I think that's a closed-minded way to look at things.
Right,
Um, Also, and I'm not trying to piss anybody off, but
right.
I tell the truth. Like I'm pretty unfiltered when I tell the truth. So
That's what we
I'm
love
not trying
about
to
you.
offend anybody when I say things like that.
Yeah,
But also, if you look at Kingdom Hearts, you're either on board with Kingdom Hearts or you're not. Like my hang up with Kingdom Hearts is that it's just I don't know. something about the writing. It's not my thing. I loved Kingdom Hearts 2, but I think it took so long to get back to it for me. I didn't play the in betweens and all that kind of stuff. But if you look at Remake on its own, if you look at that game on its own,
Uh-huh.
I can't look at that game no matter who's attached to it. No matter who is attached to it. I can't look at that game and say they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I
Yeah.
can't look at the art they created, the body of work they created. And if anybody watches my YouTube channel, you know I base a game, the merits of a game I judge are story, characters, art, music, gameplay. If I look at all five of those things and look at how much I love Final Fantasy VII, I can't look at you with a straight face and say they don't know what they're doing. This is gonna suck. There's no way, because that
Totally.
remake was so good,
It was.
and they took a possibly tumultuous concept and get handed us a stack of gold bars. I mean, it was fantastic. And
Absolutely. And there's an attachment too that the developers have to this project that is kind of unmatched. And I think a good example that came to light to me personally recently, thanks to the efforts of Shinra Archaeology Department, where a bit of lore around Seventh Heaven came out that was not in any, it was not in the game, and it wasn't, in any manuals, but it was recently translated as a concept from, uh, I think it was, one of the Ultimanias that has never really been translated. It was sort of an untranslated thing that pretty much outlines the backstory for Seventh Heaven that is presented in the book written by Nojima, Traces of Two Paths. And so the fact that that so closely mirrors, like a 26-year-old concept, 26 years later, he's able to expand on that concept in a way that really has a deep familiarity. And to me, it means he remembers. Like Nojima knows how this is. There's even a quote from him that says that he takes great pride in the fact that he's the only one that knows how it all really pieces together. Nojima said that about the lore of Final Fantasy VII, is that he takes a great pride in how it all pieces together, which means he's kind of the only one that really knows how it all connects. And so,
right,
like, the level of detail, and like, when Sleep Easy and I are breaking down the lore of the game, the fact that we can do things like look at a single monster and see its connections to Ifrit and see a whole story that was written about it in Before Crisis just by looking at a single thing. So much of the storytelling in Final Fantasy VII has just this deep, expansive lore behind it. And as a visual person, it's really easy to tell the difference between something that has nothing behind it and something that has a whole story behind it. And when you're looking
oh
at
for sure,
Remake, when I was looking at Remake, everything I looked at felt like it had this huge story. It didn't feel like it was, empty or anything like that. Like, you can look at even the Resident Evil games. Like, you look at these highly detailed environments in the Resident Evil remakes, and you look at all the stuff, and it looks so surface level. It doesn't look like it has this big backstory. Remake didn't feel that way to me. I would look at it, and
right.
then we would actually dig, and we would find connections, like, that were so deep, like the deep ground thing with Azul's horn. Like, so much stuff is so deep, and you don't do that kind of stuff unless you have such a just an overwhelming and relentless awareness of your material and how it appears to other people, that, like I said, I just have a lot of confidence.
And even the small things, like to piggyback on what you said,
Yeah.
like there are like so many things that as a content creator and as somebody just talking about the game, there's so much stuff that has obvious story and lore behind it. You forget about all of it because, like, if you look at the G specimens in the underground lab
Mm-hmm.
underneath Sector 7, people forget about that all the time. That's there. They look that way for a reason. Everything is there for a reason. And everything
Mm-hmm.
is going to play out at some point big or small, in this story.
Right.
And so when we first played Remake, all of us, the world was playing it through for the first time.
Right.
We got to that lab, and I was like, "Oh, this is different," but not different in a way that felt like they were changing the game. Different in a way that was like, "We didn't go here before." You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, this could have been here the whole time. We just didn't go here. Now we're going here.
Right.
And I was like, "Okay, Deep Ground is totally going to be a part of this." When I started
Mm-hmm.
saying that, people said I was crazy. I was like, "No, it's absolutely going to be a part of this."
Yeah.
In little things, like you said, everything has a story. There's some like writers that I just completely trust. Kazushige Nojima is one of them. He's up there with Hideyuki Kikuchi, people like that. Like, if I know Kojima's on a project, it's at least getting my attention.
Mm-hmm.
It might not wind up being my cup of tea, but I know it's going to be good because I know he's a thinking writer. He has a brilliant mind. And unlike a lot of writers who just think linearly, he thinks like a drop of water, a drop of ink in the water just spreads out, or like a spider web that just spreads out. You start with this plotter character, he goes here, goes here, goes here, and everything's got a thing attached to it. That's a world builder, and that's the kind of person I can hitch my wagon to. Because if you look at Final Fantasy VII Remake, he has introduced so many concepts that weren't there before, except for in notes on his desk, and he put them in books and stuff, like Leslie and the whole thing with Leslie and Don Corneo and all this other kind of stuff, all these little subplots that are going to get tied up in the games. Like,
Yeah.
that's fun stuff. That adds meat to the bone. It gives depth to the world. Like, Final Fantasy VII is going from this 40, 50 hour playthrough experience on PS1. Now it's becoming this living, breathing world with all these cultures. And the compilation started it, right? Talking
Mm-hmm.
about places like Benora, and then Dirge of Cerberus, even. Say what you will about Dirge of Cerberus, but it takes us to Calm, and it's got this Swedish kind of festival going on. You know what I mean? And
Totally.
like all these different cultures. Cosmo Canyon, very Native American.
Uh-huh.
Like, I can't wait to see what they do with everything. Nojima's brilliant, and I tell people that all the time. I've got
Right.
this little Rockstar Nojima gif I share every now and then, and it's like, I mean it. Like, that guy, his brain is just amazing. The
He's
stuff he comes up with.
he's a good author, and people like to point to Final Fantasy X two as like, or 10.2.5 as like proof that he doesn't know what he's doing. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you read that, it doesn't read like anything else that he writes. Two, this is that development era that you were talking about. Like, there was and I'll just say his name, Yoichi Wada, had this
Mhm.
plan for Square that a lot of internally was not liked. Like, this, kind of forcing of production on, and it I have never felt more like there was a petty middle finger to Yoichi Wada than Tidus's head exploding in 10.2.5. Like, I just feel like there's a real difference there. If you look at like just the stuff he's written for Remake recently, it feels really like, it feels like quality to me, you know.
Well, and if you think about it too, like, these are artists and these are creators, and they care about their creations.
Mm-hmm.
And like guys like Nojima, and not Nomura so much, but other people at the company that are attached to this project, likely this is their last big one.
Right.
This is their swan song. This is their last
Yeah.
big thing. And a lot of them, this is what kind of rode them up to the area they were at. And this is the thing they're going to ride out on too. You think they don't care about that? You
I
think this is just a cash grab? You've got sand between your ears.
Yeah,
You
and
got rocks between your ears.
I
I mean,
agreed. Yeah, and
yeah.
but I'm with you on that. That live stream scene. The scene where Cloud's identity, the trick of Cloud's identity, ultimately comes together, is the climax of the game. And if there's one thing that could ultimately sign me out of this game, like my buy all the copies and burn them moment, would be if they botch that somehow. But to remind you, that is Nojima's favorite scene. See, that's what he considers to be the climax of the game. And Nomura has kind of talked about the characters of Sora and Noctis, aka Yozora, being like his children. Cloud is that for Nojima. Cloud
Mhm.
is Nojima's favorite character, And so I really don't see him getting done dirty by Nojima. I don't see that. Maybe that's my copium, you know, but I don't see it that way. Um,
Well, I also don't think there's any evidence supporting the fact, except for the Twitter hate vacuum, that's actually going to happen. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like if you look at just the architecture of the story itself, they've done a great job of centering it around Cloud while really like lifting up the characters around him.
Hmm.
You know, Cloud is the nucleus for this story. Regardless of who your favorite character is, my favorite character is Vincent Valentine, but I'm not going to sit here and deny that Cloud is not the most important character in the story, because he is. It's not like Final Fantasy 12 where it's basically an ensemble and everybody's the same level of importance or whatever. Cloud is the nucleus of this story. And like Cloud's will, that's the thing that people don't talk about a lot in this thing. And like, I think why Sephiroth wants him too. Sephiroth will always be under, if he's not under Genova's thumb, he is a slave to her power at least. Like he knows that he cannot exist without her influence in some way, which I don't think she's controlling him. I think he's controlling her, but he's still tied to her. Who was the one character in all of seven who showed the willpower to break away from them, to be more powerful than them? It was Cloud in the reactor. When Sephiroth punched the sword through his gut, Cloud stood up and grabbed the sword and threw him into the Mako. I mean, Cloud's willpower is off the charts. And what we see going on with Cloud right now would probably cripple someone else into comatose. The fact that he's actually able to be strong enough mentally and spiritually to handle everything that's being thrown at him right now, to handle everything that happened to him for that 5 years he was in the Shinra basement or whatever. Him and Zack are on their own comatose.
Hmm.
That should have killed him. You know what I mean? That should have killed him dead. And it didn't. And he's still kicking. He's still up and running around. And Sephiroth's like, and Hojo's the first one to kind of notice it. Or no, Sephiroth's the first one to allude to it when they're walking and they're, trying to get to Walmart or wherever.
Hmm.
Or no, after the plate collapses and he's walking with Barrett and Tifa,
Right.
Sephiroth stops time and he's like, or he's in his head and he's like, hey, I need you to become stronger. You want to be stronger, right? He starts coaching him. He goes from discouraging him to coaching him. Because when you first see
Mm.
him, he's discouraging Cloud. And now when he sees, okay, he's what I thought he was, I'm going to push him now. I'm going to coach him now. Because I think he wants to use Cloud to break away from Genova in some way. So that's my early bird theory on that. But yeah,
I like
Cloud's
it.
willpower is off the charts, man.
It's
It's off the
unlimited.
charts.
He has
Yeah,
unlimited potential. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because of that.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the thing too. Like when in real life, there's a lot of real life written into Cloud, and this is what ties it back to Nojima. Is like, when you are just absolutely just beaten down and defeated by life, you're all alone. Imagine your darkest point in life, and that's different for every one of you, myself included. That's different for everybody. But imagine yourself being there. And willpower is the thing that gets you off your knees and gets you out the door. It's like tomorrow's going to be a better day. Cloud has an unlimited supply of that. If you've got that, you're always in the fight. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And that's like what a lot of anime characters are based on. It's a very popular Japanese theme and a lot of storytelling as well. But think of all the Japanese anime stuff. They're getting beat up. They've got unlimited willpower. Boom, they find a new level. You know what I mean? And I think
Yeah.
that's kind of what Sephiroth sees in Cloud. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. You know, Sephiroth is. I don't think Sephiroth's getting any kind of redemption. I
No.
think. I think Sephiroth is getting a real evil upgrade. Um, I think a lot of the problems that people had with Sephiroth's early inclusion will get iced out, and when we see kind of what his end game is, I think it'll um, provide enough context to make that feel relevant. And I really think that making a final boss out of out of cloud is the way to do that. And you know, again, uh, they could be going a completely different way with this that I haven't thought of, and I'd be fine with that too. I think part of why this worked so well for me though is that we even get to talk about this stuff. You know, like you were saying at the beginning of this, is just like, man, we get to talk about this stuff. It was done in such a beautifully open-ended way that if you are the kind of person that likes to theory craft, or you know, you know, fill the time between episodes with something like this, you know, there's plenty of food. And so I'm really grateful that they did that. I want to move on to a next question. You mentioned that your favorite character is Vincent. And so that does bring me, like, what is something that you think, in terms of like characters that are getting introduced that haven't been introduced yet, how do you think Vincent's gonna play? Like, what's Vincent gonna be like? How's he gonna play? How can he reasonably enter the party? What's that gonna be like?
So I think I've given a lot of thought to this. And I've gone back and forth on a couple of different things, but I think the one thing that's constant for me is I think he's going to be sort of like a phantom in Nibelheim. Like
Hmm.
think Phantom of the Opera, you know, and like but he's secluded to the town in a way, but he stays in the mansion. He's not just going to be asleep in a coffin in the basement, you know, because he's not going to be an optional character anymore, you know. So I think you get to the mansion, you do some stuff. But I think as soon as you get to Nibelheim, I think he's going to be watching the party. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Because Vincent is infused with chaos, so he has like a kind of a special tie to the energy of the planet that most people just don't have, even Soldier and that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So I think he's going to have an idea of what's happening, and he's going to smell the stench of it on the party. Like I think he's going to be like, okay, here come these jerks that are responsible for everything that's happened so far. But I think he's still going to be very stoic, very very broken and damaged too, because he's a romantic character. He's a classic gothic romantic character. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And I think you will fight Vincent. I think he will be a fight. I think it'll be one of those things where he wants to challenge the party.
I would
You know
love
what I
that.
mean?
Yeah.
I think it won't be fighting like hidden number anymore, which you could still fight hidden number,
Right.
but I think you fight Vincent Valentine, and I think he totally handles like Dante from Devil May Cry.
Think so. Or
Like give him
Bayonetta.
the devil
Yeah.
trigger and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
Man, and it's like crazy to think about mechanics that complex being introduced into an already fairly complex combat system. And so that's why when I think about stuff like that, I always get nervous, like, oh, you know, how do you make this work in a way that is as open ended as the OG was with party members, where you could just, you know, like past a certain point and it's like, you know, oh, I'm gonna beat the game with, it looks like now I'm just, you know, Sid and Vincent, you know, Sid, Vincent, and Cloud Party, you know, like that was like the number one party for a bunch of people, you know,
Right.
and I do wonder how that would like actually really work. And it sounds like, oh, you just make them all switchable, like you make it work the same way, but like it's a lot harder to make an active time battle thing, an active action RPG synchronized that way. And I'm not saying they couldn't do it. If there's anybody that could do it, I think they could. But I wouldn't like, it wouldn't break me or wouldn't surprise me if perhaps the party mechanic was a little more forced in this game. You know,
Right. And like I think I know where you're well, I think maybe I know where you're going with that. And I've thought about this too.
yeah,
Because, like, if you think about how big this game's gonna be,
right.
and also in Final Fantasy VII, there are sections of the game where some party members have nothing to do with the story.
Right.
So I could see them doing a thing where 3 or 4 people go this way and you follow that story route, and then, oh, here's what the other people are doing. The 3 or 4 over here doing this thing. You know what I mean? Different branching paths. And in between chapters, maybe everybody's together and you can go out and grind or something like that. But I could definitely see them doing a thing where they kind of force, as far from a story standpoint, like from here to there, because there are going to be new gameplay elements to this. Like when
Mm-hmm.
you get out into the world, I don't think it'll be PHS system. It could. You could call people. We know
Mm-hmm.
they got cell phones and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But I think it's going to be more than that. And you know, every new game, an incarnation of a new game, there's always the first hour or two where you see the pop-up screens talking about how
Yeah.
stuff's going to work. This is
Right.
going to work this way. This is going to work this way. Like I think the first time you have a party split, it's going to be like, boom, okay, when this happens, you can do this, you know, all this kind of stuff, and show thumbnails of examples of how to handle people. I
Yeah.
think we're going to get something like that for
Yeah.
sure, because otherwise, everybody would just keep the same party all the time, and they don't want you to do that.
So during the adventure to through the, through the normal quote unquote events that we would expect post calm with the Beagle party, what do you think Zack is doing? And how much control do we have?
Um, well, like I said, while they're doing what they're doing, I think Zach is behind. Like he's way behind. You know what I mean? So I think as they get to calm, I almost said Nibelheim. As they get to calm, Zach is at the church looking for Aerith, right?
Okay.
It's going to take him a little while to figure out what's going on. That she's just left Midgar. You
Okay.
know, I think he's going to be trying to put clues together. He's going to be walking around trying to figure things out, put clues together. Um, he's going to run into Biggs. He's going
Okay.
to run in to probably even Yuffie. I think he probably runs with Biggs for a little bit, and Biggs is going to have knowledge of what's going on. And because Biggs won't know Zach, he won't know that Zach and Cloud were buddies. You know,
He's going to be
uh,
confused by the sword though, and might be enough, and like the connection to
yes, yes,
Aerith might be enough
yes.
for him to be like, okay, maybe I need to gravitate towards this person. This is
Well,
strange.
Zach could go to Aerith's house and be like, I was looking for Aerith. I went to the church. I didn't see her. Where's she at? Oh, I don't know how to tell you this,
Mm-hmm.
but and then Marlene comes running down the stairs and talks about her daddy in Sector 7, all this kind of stuff. And then he bumps into Biggs going and investigating what happened to Sector 7. He finds out about Cloud. And I mean, you could look at it from any standpoint. I think there's going to be an element of sleuthing, and I don't know how much of it we're going to play as Zach or just see it in scenes, but I think it'll be something like that. And as he's trying to gather intel and figure out what's going on, the party's just moving along.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think he catches up with them until the end of the game.
I don't either. I think you piss too many people off. If you intersect before the break, you undermine the scene. You undermine Cloud's transformation if you
Right.
rush his
But
identity situation. Yeah.
I do believe the straw that breaks the camel's back at the end, the last little gram that shatters the glass table, is going to be laying his eyes on Zach.
Yeah.
And then something's going to happen in his brain. He's like, whoa,
I
that's
can't.
who I thought it
I
was. Wait,
can't
what's
even.
going on?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then the music kicks in, man, like
And the music
Broken
kicks in.
Cloud music. I think it's going to be crazy. Like I'm so excited. Like 140, 150 beats a minute, double kick pedal, heavy guitar with shades of Cloud's theme and shades of Those Chosen by the Planet mixed in with some new stuff. He's
Nice.
screaming
Yes.
and roaring and swinging his sword and using all of his abilities and stuff like that, and having some purple and black aura show up behind him as a phantom or whatever. I mean, just like, all kinds of crazy stuff. My brain goes nuts with it, man.
Okay. Definitely got some good questions already. So for the last little segment, we always do questions answers, and
Mhm.
so we're at the we're at time. My cat's upset with me too, so if you're hearing that, it's going on. So we'll start with Ecoms 108. Was Shiva a person when she froze the northern crater, or was she a summon then too? What actually are the summons and how do they work mechanically in the story slash lore? So you know, the answer is not super clear, but we have more clarity now. There was cut content that said that basically the summons were made by the same process that soldiers were made. And this was in the OG, right? So that's cut content, never made it. It was meant to be dialogue from Sephiroth during uh the Temple of the Ancients scene. So like we're talking at this point Watashi Sephiroth describing that process.
Mhm.
And or Genova through Sephiroth or whatever. Doesn't matter, it was cut. But that concept sort of, stuck in pop culture. It even people even sort of assumed that the Knights of the Round were the 12, were 12 Cetro knights that sealed Genova in. Then we get that Shiva was involved in sealing the wound of the Great Calamity. We get that in the info slides and in the assessment. So the the answer could be that Shiva was a Cetra, and Ifrit is described too as like, a prince, like perhaps maybe the result, that maybe, the Cetra, their soldierification, you know, looks like them becoming the summons. That's a possibility. Um, Either way, uh, I wouldn't be surprised. Like it wouldn't surprise me if they ended up being Cetra that like literally transformed into these things. Or if like not all the rules for the summons are the same. It could be that Shiva was literally a person that kind of had summon energy. Minerva's got a lot of similarities to like summon stuff. That's not precisely what she is, but there's like, sort of a shared kind of DNA thing. What are your thoughts on that, Ray?
I think I've always kind of figured along the same thing. I figured I always thought that the summons were the planet's manifestation of someone who once did something like planet saving. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? Like once did something that changed the course of the planet, like save the planet or something like that. You know more about that than I do, but that's always been kind of my theory on it.
Yeah, I think so too. And that like there's not much to go on, so we're all just sort of kind of speculating at that point.
I never thought they were just kind of like random creatures, but I always kind of thought they were like the planet's manifestation of someone who, like a former great hero or someone who did something great or heroic for the planet or something. And that's why they all look so different. You know what I mean? They're different representations.
Yeah, I mean
Like how red looks like, you know.
we all want that Cetra project. Like we all want that Cetra origin story, and it would be really cool if they did that. But I know that a certain somebody I know um, attempted to do that in a fan capacity, and it didn't work out. But because that's how Square be sometimes. Okay, let's see.
But
Next
it is still
question.
happening in a different form. So
Okay. That's so cosmic asks, do you think Zack will meet up with everyone at the crater of the end of Rebirth? Maybe party of three against Cloud and final boss could be Tifa, Barrett, and Zack? Yeah, that's what I think. I do think that's possible. Yeah. I think that's likely, as a matter of fact, personally. Any thoughts, Ray Ray?
yeah, I mean I agree. That's pretty much like I see Zach as kind of being like a guest party member because you have to move Tifa into the leadership role at that point. Because at the beginning of part 3 with Cloud gone, she's going to be the leader of the group. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think you have to make kind of Tifa the priority at that point because Tifa's gonna be like a mess too. Don't forget in that, you know. But I feel like Zack is going to be more of a guest party member, kind of like Red 13 was in the battle with Genova. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You could do something different with Zack because you know how he handles, because you've been handling Cloud the whole time, and it's essentially the same thing, same build. But I think it would be more potent if Zack was doing his thing in the battle and you were managing the party and doing
Mhm.
your thing. You know, it would feel more special, I think.
I agree. Yeah, I definitely agree. Jonah the Man asks, "Do you think the devs will do anything to address the scene wherein the Whispers use livestream magic to resurrect Barrett, or was that just a poorly thought out one-time excuse by the designers to not have a fourth playable party member in the Genova Dreamweaver battle? That is a false dichotomy, Jonah the Man. I expected better of you. I think that the reason that scene exists is to help us later on down the road. I think the exposition is simply that we need to understand that the Whispers were necessary for the party's survival, meaning that when later on it is revealed that the party died in a whisperless existence, that's why. The Whispers were not there to save anybody. Whispers weren't there to resurrect anybody. And I'm not even saying that like they died the same way, but it's just to let us know that our existence as the Beagle timeline was predicated on the thing that we were manipulated to kill by Sephiroth and by some extension Aerith, but I think her motives are a little bit more pure, and it's sort of a behind the scenes chess battle between them. Like the spell that she cast on the singularity, all of that I think will be explained, but I don't think that they're going to need to address that. I think that the story will address the purpose of that. Um, Personally,
Right.
yeah.
And also it was to serve a purpose too. I mean, because at that point the whispers kind of seemed ambiguous,
Hmm.
right? Like at that point, Genova Roth is the one that stabbed Barrett because it was like a controlled clone or whatever.
Right.
Uh, a it showed that it was pretty neutral and it was from the planet because it did heal Barrett. It did bring him back, and it also showed that Genova Roth was kind of testing things,
Hmm.
testing the whispers. It was kind of like I kind of felt like in that scene, like it would kind of shoo the whispers away a little bit, but it was also testing to see what the whispers would do. It was like an experiment, and the whispers did kind of what Genova Roth thought they would do.
Right.
Barrett, keep the timeline right because Barrett is not supposed to die there,
And it
right?
was a display that all the forms of Sephiroth that are infused into the Toriyama says that all the forms of Sephiroth are driven by the same will. He said that. So it's not like four independent actors. Like it's the same will. Sephiroth's will is driving all four forms of Sephiroth. And
Right.
so what I think that displayed is that when Sephiroth is toying with the whispers, it's displaying to us that he has more awareness about what's happening than we do. We the player and we the
Mhm.
party. You know why? Which is why so many people immediately speculated that the true meaning of the title remake was that Sephiroth is remaking, you know, Final Fantasy VII. I think that later on down the road, we're going to learn that it was Aerith remaking it. Um, Not so that she lives, but that so that Sephiroth loses. But that's just my take. Um,
That's interesting.
and part of the reason I think that is because he's really excited. He said that he's really excited to tell us why he called it remake and what he's going to call the third title. He said that in the developer statements, and everybody right off the bat, as soon as remake came out, says, "I get it. Sephiroth's remaking Final Fantasy VII." So many people said that I think Nomura wouldn't have been excited about revealing it to us if it had already been like widely guessed. Because Nomura has a
Mhm.
habit of when things are widely guessed, like defeatedly releasing trailers that show Jack Garland. Okay, so
Show Jack Garland.
Right. Like he was like, you guys guessed it. Here's Garland. Okay, this is the Garland origin story. Okay.
Yeah.
So Romagus, who thank you for your patience. If the whispers are gone, why is Zack constantly not able to find Aerith? Zack is seen dragging Cloud post whispers, so it's not like they just vanish. I think that the reason he's not able to find Aerith is he's probably whisked away outside the gates of Midgar, and that he tries to find her 3 months later after he's cleaned up his outfit and doesn't look like, depleted street trash.
Right.
But in terms of seeing dragging Cloud post whispers, so it's not like they just vanish. No, the whispers are gone in the past.
Yeah, I
we
think
see
that
the whispers. We
confirms
see
that
the
they're
whispers
gone.
actually explode in September. Like the golden flakes of the defeated whispers don't just happen in the present; they happen in the past. So
Yeah.
we see him dragging.
All at the same moment.
Yeah. So I do think they just vanish. I think that they're gone. I think the Terrier universe is a whisperless one.
Yeah. That's the best way to put it. That's accurate, I feel like.
But I might not be. But I might not be understanding Ramagus's question right. So if I'm not, you can feel free to correct me. Lieutenant Birdman. Let's get to the juicy part. Who is going to die this time? Go.
Tifa. Or my other guess is Barrett. For two reasons. One, Barrett was originally in the earliest drafts of the game, he was going to be the one to die. That doesn't mean anything at all. But look at how much time they put into John Bentley's performance as Barrett in the first game. Who was more lovable in Final Fantasy VII Remake than Barrett? Like, I think this time around,
to whispers personally, really, but no, go on. Okay.
For me personally, if you want to rip my heart out this time, they kill Barrett, and I'm like, that would probably end me, because I looked forward to every scene Barrett was in. Like, he displayed the full gamut of human emotions, triumph, pain, anger, happiness, joy. He was goofy at points. He was a good dad. I mean, all these different things. He was a pretty good leader. I mean, he was all of these things in the game, and John Bentley's performance was just astounding. And might I add real quick that he wasn't even nominated for voiceover performance of the year. I think that's just a friggin' crime.
Me too, yeah.
If you want to rip my heart out, I don't want them to kill Barrett, but that's how you would do it.
It's true. I'm getting sad just thinking about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the line where Barrett says, "I'll be back." He's talking to Marlene.
Oh my God, stop.
What if he doesn't come back?
Oh my God, that sounds terrible.
Doesn't it?
How dare you? How dare you, Ray? This is your fault. If this happens, I'm blaming you.
People won't blame me for the good stuff I predict, but they'll blame me for that one.
That's right. That's true. And then Tifa, okay. So
after she saves Cloud, like after she does this important thing and Cloud remembers her and they come out of the live stream together, and it's like this happy kind of moment, and everybody's like, "Oh, shoink." Can you even imagine?
I mean, I wouldn't like that. I wouldn't like it.
Or if they did a thing where, this was my original thought when I thought about this too, Sephiroth knows everything. He knows who saves Cloud.
Right.
He knows who saves Cloud.
Right.
He knows who really changes the course of the planet with everybody else. Tifa's got a huge role in bringing Cloud back to prominence. If he's going after anybody, anybody.
Right. If Sephiroth's Sephiroth's endgame is the corruption of Cloud, Tifa is the biggest threat to him finding the inner strength of his own identity, and I'm aware of that. I am aware of that. And I know it's very easy to dismiss that, and I've heard the major theory crafters just say that cannot happen. No, 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 no. And
So if you're Kazuchika and Nojima
yeah,
and you see everybody saying that, what's the first thing you want to do?
yeah. I mean, it
You want
just
to figure out how to make it happen in your head.
right. Yeah,
Right.
you're gonna figure out how Titus kicks the mine on the beach in 10.2.5. I get it. I get it. I do think that that is okay. And I there are quotes that have said that there is nothing sacred, that nothing is off the table. Shinra Archaeology Department has that regarding things that they might change.
I'll have to
That
check them out.
Yeah, there is a nothing is sacred quote, but that's part of the thing is that the developers give a variety of quotes that meet different criterion so that they're permitted to do whatever it is that they want and also not panic people. But I do actually think that if they tried to pull that'd be like the one time that corporate would come out and say, no, you can't do that. Like you can't do that. And I do have some actual problems with it outside of that. Like I do think that it works narratively for Sephiroth's endgame, but what it would do to Tifa's character is that it would basically make her only purpose be to save Cloud. And what I've seen them do with Tifa's character, especially with Traces of Two Paths, is really make her like valuable outside of her role in Cloud's life. And I think that's sort of a thing that they're trying to do is make these female characters more than just pawns in some love triangle or, adornments for the main character. They're trying to turn them into full characters. And so I do think that if Tifa's purpose is just to die so that Cloud doesn't get saved, I see some things about that I really don't like, and I don't think
Well,
are timed well.
I've never looked at. It might just be the way I was raised. That's part of it. I've never looked at the female characters in these things as like that. Now I
Right.
know that is a broad perception,
Sure. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I've that women especially like that, especially women in a lot of the stuff that I enjoy. Because to me, Aerith was always like she's the angel type character, right? She's the sacred kind of thing, and get her off the board. And Tifa saves Cloud's life. Tifa saves the world, and she saves Cloud. I mean that's kind of how I always looked at it. So if you want, but picture this scenario, right? And this is what I thought about when I thought about Tifa dying. And it's not like really a red herring. It's a shock for the audience.
Uh-huh.
But let's say you're at the Forgotten Capital, Sephiroth's coming down with the sword and everything, but he intentionally misses Aerith. Like he just misses. And she's waiting for it. She's waiting for it. She knows it's about to happen. She's getting ready to take it. And then shunk, the sword goes into the ground and he just stares at her and she's like super confused. And Aerith's almost kind of broken. You know what I mean? And that's when he tells her his plan. You know what I mean? Almost like a
Yeah.
challenge to her.
Yeah.
See if you can stop me. You know
Right.
what I mean? And that would be like this huge misdirect for the audience. But then he does try to kill Tifa. But she's not killed, she's mortally wounded. You know what I mean? And Aerith could have a hand in keeping her safe, but that's going to be one of the things that starts to break Cloud because that will happen before the Northern Crater. That will happen right before Icicle in the Northern Crater.
Right.
So, I mean, there's a whole different mess of things you could do. But I think, as far as like Aerith's death on the altar at the Forgotten Capital, I think it's going to be something like that. I think that's going to be not where he kills Aerith, but where he reveals his plan. I think that's where it's going to happen. And it's going to be a challenge to Aerith. Like, I know I
Yeah.
know. Let's see if you can stop me. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? I think that would be pretty wild. And Cloud is the main piece. But I think if you do a thing where you don't trick the fans, but his intent is to kill Tifa, and by all intents and purposes, whatever he does should have killed her,
Right.
but she survives. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
that
mean, you
might
could.
be. Yeah, I mean, it would be really cool if like what what Aerith ultimately did, like her end game, like her secret, ministrations behind the ministrations, her casting the spell, putting the bath bomb in the singularity, as Romicus puts it, has something to do that subverts that plan. Like it would be really cool if Aerith saved Tifa. I like that personally.
Yeah,
I think that would be really cool. In terms of who I think should die, I think character deaths we will see. I think we will see Aerith die. I think we will see Roche die. And I think Roche's death will be kind of sad. Um,
I think we're going to see Zack die. I think that will correct itself. I think Zack will die because it's his personality. I think he is the type of guy that's going to lay on a grenade for the person next to him. That's who he is.
I
He's going
could
to fall on
see
his sword to save somebody's life.
I could see him
Yeah.
dying somewhere else, yeah. And I also do think that this is that that where the chips fall here, they're they're falling permanently. There is no more, like, this is the final iteration of Final Fantasy VII.
Oh yeah,
And
this
that
is it.
so if somebody doesn't make it through, that's it. Like, uh, even if they do, like, when with in some reboot 50 years from now with a completely different team, it'll be a different team, and I'll be dead, so I don't care. um
Right.
you
Same
know
here. It won't be my problem.
won't be my problem. Yeah, I don't think that the developers, like particularly the big three, you know Kitase, Nojima, and Nomura, are doing something that they have the intention of reversing. I think that they've introduced live stream magic for the sole purpose of making it gone forever, and that's my take here. Um, okay, so let's see. Uh,
Yeah, at the end of this game, we're not going to get the Aerith starting over image and then roll credits. That's not going to happen this time. So
okay, okay, we've got Ruthalis. Do you have thoughts on Aerith's "Follow Them, the Yellow Flowers" line? How it may tie into Rebirth and/or Reunion? I do have thoughts on the Yellow Flower line, and the fact that that's like the dying words of this planetary defense function that is the Whispers. That's like the dying words of that function to Aerith, right? As far as what that like ultimately means, I think it ties into something that's being kind of developed in a video I don't want to spoil by Sleep Easy. So I'm not going to talk about it, but go for it, Ray.
I think it. So we know Aerith has visions, and we
Mhm,
know that she
mhm,
is lost. I think
mhm,
it has something to do with, and I'll be honest with you, I've thought a little bit about this. I've not thought a ton about this, but the planet knows that Aerith is overwhelmed and lost and scared. And like even that line at the end of the game where she says, "I miss it, the steel sky," that's a metaphor for not being out in the open world and having this big responsibility. That's a metaphor for the safety of being happy go lucky and living in Sector 5 and just being the flower girl and all that kind of stuff.
mhm,
Um, so I feel like it's going to have something to do with her visions and something to do with her safe, like a safe place for her. Like whenever, think of this thing, visualize this thing whenever you're lost. Follow the yellow flowers. That's going to
mhm,
mean something to her. I think it's a comforting item from the planet because the planet won't be able to talk to her anymore. I think Sephiroth has cut that off.
mhm,
So I think the planet's like, look, you got to go be that girl now. You got to go be that woman, and you got to be all powerful on your own. and you got to figure this out. But I'm going to leave you with this: whenever you feel lost or whenever you feel scared, just follow the yellow flowers, and that's
Mhm.
going to mean something to her.
Totally. Totally. I agree. Ronami says, I'm not totally convinced Cloud boss fight will end Rebirth. Something like that may happen, but the number of people predicting it makes me feel like the team will want to do something different, especially with the focus on Seth and marketing. I don't know, though, just a feeling. What I'll say is that, like, if you would have asked this question a year ago or even 2 years ago, people, like, the amount of feedback I got that was like, that is the most asinine thing that I've ever heard when I said that Cloud was going to be the final boss of part two. I mean, it has become more popular as we've gotten closer, which makes me think that it wasn't that popular during the production of the scenario. So I don't think that they're going to respond to like the popularity of it as it gets closer. Just like I don't think that they would have retitled their game Rebirth, even though it was the like maybe the number two most predicted title. You know, um,
I think Reunion was the most popular
yeah,
title
and they just
being
took that
predicted.
off the plate. They're just like, here, Crisis Core, you have it.
It's like on Crisis Core.
Yeah, yeah,
We've already got the trademark for
yeah. We
it.
got it. Yeah, so that way, Reawaken is that's what I think
Right.
that's going to be. By the way, I think Reawaken for 3.
Refire. Like if you work in a restaurant, you got to make a pizza again. It's a refire. It's
That's right.
refire.
Yeah,
Final Fantasy VII Refire.
yeah. Okay. Pez, would be possible having a split party through the story of the game, like Cloud, Barrett, Tifa, Aerith, Red one side, and then the other side, Zack, Sid, Yuffie, Vincent, and Kate Sith. I hate it, but I'm not saying no, man. Like I'm not. I'm like I wouldn't be surprised if Zack had Yuffie or something. I don't know about Sid, but uh yeah, like I don't don't
Well,
I'm
yeah, and
not
that's kind of
saying
what
no. I'm not saying no. It sounds awful. That sounds
I
so
know.
scary.
That's kind of what we were talking about earlier with the PHS system. How's it going to work and
Yeah.
everything? And it's like I said, I was like, man, I don't want it to be this, but I think they might do this.
Yeah. What if they shove the two optional characters with Zack? What if they shove Yuffie and Vincent with Zack?
Oh shit! No, think about this. What if Kate Shee and because he's in Midgar with Reeve.
Sure.
What
Yeah.
if what if Kate Shee and Yuffie get stuck with Zack?
Yeah. Yeah. Keiichi, they run into Yuffie on their way chasing, and then Cloud flips out during Nibelheim, so it's actually on the tail of Cloud that Zack finds Vincent. I'm hating all this. Okay, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna
Yeah,
stop. Yeah.
it kind of sucks.
Yeah, yeah, I don't like that. But it's possible. A lot of stuff's possible. Okay, and then Romagus, no, no, no. They is a reference to the party, not the whispers. The whispers are gone, but the party is still there. The party doesn't just vanish. Right. Right. I would assume that like Cloud, for instance, being carried by Zack, is still alive until he dies, which would be later than he's being carried by Zack. Like, I'm not saying he makes it all the way to the freeway without his Buster Sword, but maybe he dies, period. At some other earlier time. Like his first battle, he sucks, so he just dies. Um,
Well, with that, you have to think kind of like upper tier. You have to kind of open your mind a little bit because the point they enter the singularity, everything is fine. So like, you know, it's hard to explain.
like
Like
yeah,
anything in
like
the
I
singularity,
and they might not do a good job explaining it. They might just not. They might just like, and I hate this, and I know this sucks like to think about because people like, especially on this side of the ocean, um on this side of the Pacific particularly, they don't like it when paradoxes exist or stuff isn't super cleanly explained. um
hmm
but let's say that from the moment that they enter the singularity, they just literally vanish from whatever path they were on in the Terrier line. Like, you know, up to specifically that day in December when they're at the edge of the highway and the singularity is opened up, all of a sudden, you know, comatose Cloud wandering around, you know, in the Sector 7 slums without his Buster Sword just disappears. I know that sounds terrible, like something that they would never do, but I totally see them not caring about it or not like being super precise with the way that they explain things. Because again, that's something that's more, I hate to say it, but Western, you know, in the way that those kind of constructs need to come together.
Right, yeah. You kinda have
Yeah,
to look at it. It's not linear, it's almost like helixical, the
helical,
way it
yeah,
runs together.
yeah,
So, like, that would've time everything changed while they were in there, so it would have been assumed that whatever the new past is was that person's past, but they're not gonna remember it. So, I mean, there's no way to show that without doing a whole other game showing how it led up to that. So there's going to be some things like in any movie that handles this kind of stuff. Some details are swept under the rug. But basically, the two Buster Swords is when Cloud was in the singularity, the party's in the singularity, they're unchanged, they're unscathed. They still have their past memories and stuff like that. But the new past will look at that party as it went into the singularity when it got to that point. And here we are. I think that's how they're going to handle it.
yeah. I do too. Um, uh, let's see. Okay, we'll I think Ramagesh, you and I will talk maybe on the Discord or something because I guess I'm not understanding necessarily what you're saying, but Zack isn't finding Aerith. Um, right. I would imagine that Aerith is with Cloud. Um,
Yeah, she's way ahead of where he's at.
and I mean that's another thing too is why I think maybe they literally like the from the from the residents of the Terrier altered timeline. I do think that there's a possibility that they witnessed the death of these characters. Like, and part of it is the line in the Rebirth trailer. Whereas, what are you saying that I died? And I don't think that's him talk. I don't think that's Tifa talking to Cloud. I think it's Tifa talking to somebody that thought she died in Midgar because she died in Midgar, according to the residents of that whisperless universe.
Hmm.
That's kind of what I think that actually leads
Ooh,
to.
so yeah, like what if the singularity changing, like existence had to change a few properties, so them being in the singularity, their past selves are dead in the Terrier timeline. That would be very interesting because Dyne could have Marlene. He could still be Marlene's dad. I mean, it could do all these other things because Barrett's dead. It could do all these things.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, okay, so we got a lot of people trying to convince me that Zack is dead, and I on the Discord maybe I'll share why he's like I'm okay. How about this? I'm gonna rate my certainty level on whether Zack is alive. On a scale of 1 to 10, for just pure lore interpretation reasons, I would be a 6 out of 10. Like I'd say I'm 60% sure Zack is being shown to be alive by the lore and by all the things that we would get from what's being presented to us. The rest of me, the stuff that's happening outside, like my attachment to the project, I I have a very very strong feeling he's alive. So that's if you're
Yeah,
wondering why
like
I'm like I'm pushing that stuff out of the way, it's not because I don't think that your theories aren't good or that they're not well thought out or well reasoned. I'm aware of the traces of two paths referenced with Clay Gainsborough and how he's lost wandering, trying to find himself. I get that. I understand that's precedent. I understand that that Jesse's dad is, sort of put in this in between place, and that's interesting. I do think that the main narrative purpose of that is just to give Jesse motivation to be an Avalanche, not necessarily because it's trying to foreshadow some state in between life and death that Zack is going to go on a journey on. But I do hear what you're saying, and I'm not trying to discard any of that. So just so you guys know, I love all of you. Okay.
Right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
when we're doing theory crafting, I tell people on my channel a lot too. I'm never discounting your theory.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you what I feel strongly I'm thinking. But people are more than welcome to bring what they think to the table too and talk about it.
Right.
It may not necessarily change what I'm thinking. And I'm with you. 95% Zack is totally alive. And the reason I lean hard in that direction is because I feel like from this writing team and what they're trying to do, I feel like to show that and he's dead would not only feel like a troll and a bad misdirect, but it feels like unnecessary writing. And now that we know it's only 3 games, there's only so much storytelling real estate they're going to have.
Right.
So, yeah, you gotta really just anything that's not potent to the story. I don't feel like at this point can be in it. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. And so that's why, just from a raw lore perspective, I'm kind of leaning that way. Blitz, welcome in. Okay, let's see. Will Reunion turn Crisis Core into a better game?
No, the remaster will though. The remaster itself.
I think that so regarding my big issues with Reunion's gameplay, it already looks a lot better. Like the actual movement is obviously snappier. The combo system looks to be a little bit more fast paced. It looks to be a little bit more directly tied to player input, which, the original Crisis Core battle system didn't feel that way to me at all. As far as DMW though, that's still there, and I'm not super excited about that, but I do see that they've reworked the combat enough that they may have changed that to be something that's less upsetting or annoying or something. So I'm like, I think I'm genuinely excited about playing through Reunion just to see what's different. I don't see it addressing some of the worst mistakes that I felt like Crisis Core made, particularly the church. Like, we see that Zack falls through the church again, and I didn't like that. I thought that was just lazy writing, and that's clearly still here. So, it's not going to be perfect, but it is what it is. What are your thoughts, Ray?
Well, I think if my two biggest problems with the actual gameplay of Crisis Core, okay, 3, was the camera handled real weird.
Yeah.
Camera handled real weird. The actual mashing X to slash through people.
Yeah.
Zack's got 2 motions. He's got this way and he's got this way, and it's kind of random how he hits them, And then the L1 and R1 triggers to cycle through the different things you're doing. I think if you could fix those, it looks like they've already fixed his motion, so that looks great. And from what it showed, the game moving around, the camera and stuff moving around, it looks smoother. So as long as they fix how you cycle through your actions, that's a win for me. That'll make it much more fun to play, because I'm playing through it right now just to kind of refresh myself. Yeah, and it's rough. It's rough. Yeah. And so, but the story elements are better than I remember them, actually. So, especially Angeal, I totally forgot he was like totally Qui-Gon Jinn from Star Wars to Zack Obi-Wan Kenobi to Cloud's Luke Skywalker. You know what I mean? So, I'm enjoying Angeal more than I did in the past now, but I think it's because I know what to expect from the character, like some of the hammy lines and stuff like
Yeah.
that, and some of the stilted delivery. But I think I just appreciate that character so much better.
Yeah.
And the Genesis stuff, like it's hard to remember his stuff that wasn't the cringy Loveless quoting, but then when you get it, you're like, okay, that there's some good stuff right there. Can we get away from all
Mm-hmm.
the Loveless crap, and can we get to this crazy MFer right here who's
Yeah.
like Ross BFF? Can we get to this? More of this.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to
I
change some writing. I don't know that they will though.
there's different lines. So they've already have slightly different lines. Like, and so what that gives me hope is that maybe the localization will be less cringy. And
Right.
yeah, and I I also think that, and this is my big brain upset sleep easy prediction, that one of the things that will change when whatever whisper stuff happens, in the game, like we'll see the stamp bag change. I think we'll see the fifth verse of Loveless change.
Mm, okay.
Because I do think that, that they made it really clear that Loveless was worth studying. Like, they made it his personality, and that was very jarring. Sorry, Blitz. That was very jarring. But like, it was essential enough to his character, and it was written in this way that, one, wouldn't make a good play. I don't know who would watch that play if it was just that. But two, obviously had like huge significance to the story being told. And I do think that if we're looking at a slightly different remake that tells a story that's going to maybe diverge a little bit, or have like a grander core meaning, and we're looking at a way to bring the compilation in a more like synergistic way into the finished product of Final Fantasy VII, changing Loveless would be a really good way to do that. At least the fifth verse, because it doesn't look like they're changing any of the Japanese Genesis lines that we've heard so far.
Right. And even if, they keep that, like in Rebirth, I don't want to hear that. He needs to be changed and different in Rebirth. But if he drops a line here and there just out of habit, it needs to have a dark, brooding tone to it. It's got to have a dark, ominous tone to it. You know what I mean? And
I
apply to what's happening.
Yeah,
But yeah, all that Loveless stuff, like the rose sniffing, pontificating anime villain, I'm kind of over at this point. I think Trey's Cushionata from Gundam Wing was the last one of those I really enjoyed, and then after that, it was kind of like, you're not a viable threat.
right, right. And yeah, I mean, it would be nice if he didn't, if like he just like, if they just accidentally forgot to put him in the Nibelheim flashback. I wouldn't be super mad. Say,
Whoops,
whoops,
banana
whoops.
peel. What?
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay. Do you have any closing thoughts or questions for me? And then we'll call it. And this has been really fun, by the way.
You talking to me or the chat?
Oh yeah, I'm talking to you, big guy.
Oh, okay. All right. So, what? So we've talked about how you would end Rebirth and everything.
Mm-hmm.
How would you? What would you do handling the whole idea in Game 3 of Neo Midgar, and how do you think it's going to play into the story?
Um, I don't think Neo Midgar will happen. I really don't, and I think that the it seems like an obvious end game, but I don't think the purpose of Final Fantasy VII is to make humans succeed at like I don't think the end game is that we get like this ultimate happy ending for humanity or like synchronicity with nature. I think that what what the promised land really will end up looking like, what like species enlightenment will end up looking like, will be much closer to what we see at the beginning of Advent Children, at the end of the OG, which is like a detachment from technology, a detachment from all of that stuff. I think it'll just be, like we'll see something that's more, um, interdependent and communal with nature. That humanity will become the new steward of the planet, but not in a way that's, you know, uh, Shinra esque, right? It won't be like the conquest of technology over the planet. I think that what the goal of Aerith is to allow, what her remake is to allow humanity to be healthy stewards of the planet, to basically take the role of the Cetra. Because there's a really interesting thing about the Cetra and humanity and the way that they split apart, that's described by Sephiroth. And I'm not sure if this will be revised or how it will be revised, but it almost makes being human and non Cetra into a choice, right? And I think that there is some genetic, component to the two, but there's this element of like the choices that you make, give you this connection with the planet. And I think that that's the end game, personally. So I don't think we're going to see Neo Midgar. I think the end game for Aerith, why it's called Remake, is going to be more about teaching humanity the lessons it needs to be better than somebody that just wants this, Balam Garden style metropolis. Personally.
Well, I think you kind of, yeah, you got there in a way that I kind of think too. But my thinking is like even the Cetra, the Promised Land, and what Shinra sees as Neo Midgar,
Yeah.
think they're just unattainable because people can't be there.
Right.
Like I think it's like a metaphor for like Shinra misinterprets things all the time. That's kind of their thing. They misunderstand stuff because they're corrupt and they're gross, you know. But even the Cetra could not get to the promised land. It's like the happy hunting ground. It's like
Right.
heaven. It's like that kind of thing. You
Mm-hmm.
know, Shinra's like, oh, it's the land of infinite Mako. It's like, no, humans can't be there. So I think the promised land is Gaia without people.
Right.
So I think the end of Final Fantasy VII, when you see Red 13 and the Cubs roll up over the hill,
Right.
I think that is the promised land. There's no people. That's
Right.
what that's always been my interpretation. But you kind of we're getting there in a roundabout way on that.
Yeah. I
I think we agree on a lot of points on things. So
yeah, I do too. I do too. Although I think there's going to be way less Genesis personally, but other than that, that could be copium. Um,
it'll be interesting after we play Rebirth to
yeah,
come back, and I'm going to do a scorecard for myself personally and be like, this is everything I got completely wrong, and this is where it's going, and I was totally wrong about all this,
right.
and right about a little bit of this. You know,
Big same. Yeah, and
I'm looking forward to that self assessment. You know what I
yeah, and
mean?
we'll even talk soon. We'll talk after. We'll talk. We might even talk again before reunion, because there's sure to be more trailers coming out. There's sure to be like interviews, all sorts of stuff.
Hmm.
But definitely, reunion will keep us fed for a bit. So, guys, that is the end of our podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Really, really appreciate it. Thanks again, Ray. And please check out all the Ray stuff possible. And so, with that, I love you all, and goodbye.